Okay, oh,
He just, yeah, he's there though.
all right, we're just gonna give another couple of minutes for folks to finish signing up and then we'll get started.
Oh, he's coming after me, so I can just back in. Oh, let's see. Sure, actually, the commission have a chance to meet, how that job is. Okay. So we're gonna introduce them, make sure it's going back.
It's back and it's gonna be what it turned down. Yeah, it's turned down. That's turned enough. Yeah, it's red light comes on. And then you turn it off. Yep. Back this up just a little bit.
Okay, we're gonna call this edition of the planning commission meeting for the town of Canal Beach to order at 5:40 p.m. We'll start with the roll call members. We have everyone present. Bailey Thompson is with us via Zoom. We have the agenda. Everybody has a copy of the agenda, correct? Yes, okay. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? No more motion. You two want to fight over who's going to do the second? Okay. All right.
I would.
So, any discussion on the agenda? Okay. All approved?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Bailey?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, agenda is approved. Next, we have the approval of the minutes, but I know we have a standing question reference April 13th that we are going to go ahead and invoke the opinion of our newly founded town attorney on for the 13th minutes that are in the packet. There's a question that's been posed to me reference quorum for that meeting. Our full complement of members, we did not have a full complement at the time. Out of 7, we had 5 members.
Oh, actually, it was 3 for April.
Attended, but we only had 5.
We had 5 at the time of the meeting. We had 5 appointed members. And we only had 3 in attendance. So the question is, would that constitute a quorum for that meeting?
You know, I had 3 in attendance.
We had 3 in attendance. We had 2 that were not in attendance, and we had 2 vacant positions.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
You think that is a quorum?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That was easy. Thank you. Okay, based on that. Do we have any other questions reference the minutes for February 9th, April 13th, and May 11th that are included in the packet?
Just that Dodson was misspelled throughout the packet,
Oh, okay.
so, you know, correction on that.
Okay.
You and Bob are on the same track tonight. We did the same thing. Was that the only question or correction anyone had? Bailey, anything from you?
I have nothing, so it looks good to me.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a look here. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes with the Dodson correction?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so all approved. Okay. Now we move to the public comment on non-public hearing related planning commission matters. So just to make sure that we're clear with everybody in attendance, this means public comment that is not related to the conditional use permit that's under public hearing this evening, or the short-term rental ordinance that is under public hearing this evening. Anything else that we're dealing with, that's what this session of public comment is for. And we're collecting the sheets now. And everyone gets 3 minutes. Okay, we will start with, just a second. We will start with Mr. Fitzpatrick on the public comment.
Good evening, Michael Fitzpatrick, 401 Ward Street. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Great. The thing that I'd like to speak about tonight is related to the builders in town and 2 meetings that have taken place here in May and again this week with the town staff in regard to some of the challenges that they've been facing with being able to get the permits that they need and to be able to move forward with trying to, I think, satisfy their customers and be able to do business here in town is probably the best way to phrase this. And there's a couple of things. The 2 burning issues following the meeting that we had with town that the builders asked me to express to you was the situation with the bar, the floor area ratio. And in particular, what they're feeling like this is a very restrictive right now with our current ordinance where we have a 0.4 ratio on the 2nd floor. And it really limits the amount of square footage that can be built on most of the lots here in Colonial Beach. It's essentially, if they have a 1-car garage and they're trying to build a house, they have a 1,500 square foot house that they can build. The house that I live in right now would never have been approved if these ordinances were being enforced historically here in town, just as an example. And there's many more of those. So the builders would really like to see the planning commission take this on and to revise the ordinances to really consider what they mean in terms of square foot coverage and revising the 2nd floor coverage to a 0.8 ratio rather than a 0.4, which would enable them to build houses that I think we would like to see going up here in town, not limiting everything to bungalows, but actually building some beautiful, nice new $700,000 homes in the beach areas. That's one thing. And I know this may not be within your purview, but the other major burning issue, and if you all have any influence with this, is the water accessibility fee is out absolutely beyond belief to most of them. They don't mind seeing it raised to a higher level for a tap fee, but to have a tap fee, have a water accessibility fee, and that doesn't even then guarantee you that you're going to have water going to that lot. It's not in alignment with the rest of the jurisdictions in the area where most of them build homes in Westmoreland County, in Caroline County, in King George County, that this is completely against what they are used to seeing. And my fear is, as on the Economic Development Committee here, that we are killing economic development. We've already driven one builder out of the beach who has declared they will never build another house in Colonial Beach. We have the 5 major ones here in town that are getting extremely upset. And before we go off a cliff here, I would really like to see the Planning Commission take a leadership role in expressing the concerns here and making sure that we're aligned with our strategic plan and that we are moving forward with trying to help our builders.
Thank you. Alan Griffey. Did I say your name right? You did. Okay. And when you get up there, if you could make sure that the microphone is on, that would be wonderful. Does it have the red light?
You don't see a light.
Absolutely.
There you go. That's a little bit better. Thank you very much.
Alan Griffey, 157 Shellfield Lane. I want to echo much of what Mike had to say. I attended the meeting this week at the town call for the builders. I represent a couple of builders in land acquisition and sales. And for the first time, I think everyone in the room finally understood what the change in fees were. There was some confusion as to how the water sewer availability fee was going to be added to the program. What we did was we took a tap fee of $6,000 for both water and sewer, and we raised that to $8,500, which is nearly a 50% increase. We then added something we've never had, which is a water sewer availability fee, an additional $5,000. Now we're having to pay $13,500 for what we once had to pay only $6,000 for. Significant increase at probably the worst time. Land prices are going up. Builders materials prices are going up. Interest rates are up. One way to kill the market is to continue to push costs. My marching orders have been in the last week, go to the county, find as many building lots as we can get. Westmoreland County charges $25 water sewer availability fee. And if you're nice to them, they won't even charge you that. They just tell you yes or no, you have water sewer. Not the case here. That's residential. For commercial, you just chased all your commercial prospects away. What was $15,000 for water and sewer tap for a new commercial structure is now $21,250 plus $20,000 for water and sewer availability fee. So now I have to pay $41,500 if I want to provide water services to a mobile vending court, a flat lot where all I need is a hose bib. $41,000. I'd like the planning commission to try to take that on here in the near future if possible. The second thing I wanted to talk about was also the floor area ratios. Point 4, the concept behind the floor area ratio is that you don't want the footprint of the house to be too big for the lot. You want some green space. When you go to a 2-story, you should be able to increase that from 0.4 to some higher number, because you can put the same square footage in a 2-story and take up half the footprint as a 1-story. And Columbia Beach is no longer just a town of bungalows. We have a lot of interest in 2 stories. We have a lot of interest in homes with 2-car garages, which we can't do with a 5,000 square foot lot with a 0.4 ratio. If I can stack that and put the garage in, let's say a 0.8, only on multi-stories, I think 0.4 is fine on a 1-story. You know, if you would take a look at that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Will Knuckles.
Evening, Will Knuckles, 204 Monrovia Avenue. I realize that time is always of a limited commodity at the Planning Commission, but thinking about the work plan for the year, I hope that there will be some reconsideration to bring up an issue that was talked about quite a bit last year, which is workforce housing and its availability. It's been talked about a little bit, they're kind of mucked around a little bit with the concept about trying to build some incentives if the Lennar properties ever get built, but that's like the undeveloped area, there's still the rest of town. There's been some talk about addressing it through short-term rentals, but really that's sort of a separate issue in my head. It may impact it, but really I'm looking at ways to incentivize changing the way people build in a ways that actually will create more housing stock that our workforce, the people that we need to run these businesses that we're trying to attract to come to town. And it seems like that topic doesn't get a dedicated amount of time to focus on it to really make the headway to actually get to the goal. I think this has been going on, I don't know, it's a couple of years now that it's been brought up and sort of dropped and brought up and dropped. So I hope that with the rest of this work here, there could be some consideration as to changing what the priorities are over the next several months to try to take a real stab at this, because it's going to take a while, I think, both in terms of staff time as well as the time of the commission to really figure out what is going to be possible, and then figuring out whether there's an appetite for what is possible to actually happen in the town. Because I think this is going to be a huge economic bottleneck. It already is to a large degree. There's a lot of businesses that already talk about employee shortages, and in part that's because it's tough to contemplate taking a job that would pay the wages that support the businesses here and then commuting really long distances, where if you live that far away in the first place, you could just work in that community. We already have some folks that commute as far as Fredericksburg to come here to work for pretty regular jobs, but I think that's because they're excited about being here. We can't really bet, I think, the town's workforce about everybody willing to make that sort of sacrifice when they could just work in other communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Hang on while we find the mystery board. I think we found it. Okay. Okay, that was everyone that was signed up for the public comment on non-hearing related matters. Since we have a lot of other folks signed up for the other things, I'm not gonna. And we had it out for a while there. I'm not gonna peruse the crowd for additional. We will go ahead and move on. Thank you everyone for your comments, very much appreciated. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the first public hearing. We will open the public hearing for the conditional use permit for the Langdorfs for the mobile vending courtyard on Beach Terrace. We will open that at 5:55 p.m. First person on the list that we have. Would you like to read in on this? Certainly. Absolutely. Start with the presentation from the staff.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we're having a public hearing this evening on conditional use permit request 23-01. This is a request by Jason and Jessica Langdorf. They're requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow a mobile vending courtyard in a resort commercial RC zoning district. The zoning ordinance defines a mobile vending courtyard as a lot on which one or more mobile vending vehicles are located for the purpose of selling items to walk-up customers and not for the purpose of storage or sale of mobile vending vehicles. The ordinance requires the approval of a conditional use in the RC district to allow the courtyard. The zoning ordinance designates certain uses as needing approval of a conditional use permit when those uses that due to their unique characteristics or potential impacts on surrounding properties and the town require individual consideration. This consideration is given to their design, configuration, and or operation at a particular location proposed. These individual considerations may call for the imposition of individualized conditions to ensure that the use is appropriate at the proposed location. The subject property is identified here on the map with the arrow, subject property. The subject property fronts the west line of Beach Terrace, approximately 55 feet south of Halterwood Street, and is zoned, as I stated, resort commercial RC. As you can see, the surrounding properties indicated in blue are also zoned RC. It's identified as tax map parcel 3A, parentheses 2274, parcel 6B, and it's known as 20 Beach Terrace. This is an aerial look at the property. There are two existing structures on the subject property. There's a shed located behind the building that's closer to Beach Terrace.
And that's,
We,
so I'm just, as you go through, I'm just gonna try to point some things out here because it can be a little difficult to see. That shed that you're talking about is right above the number 7-4,
it
correct?
is, yes,
Okay.
sir. Yeah, it's a little bit down. See the white building right on the subject property? It's
Yeah,
right
Right,
behind there.
it's that little black.
That's the
cube.
shed.
Yeah, okay.
And then the front building is a building that has been in town for a long time. Some of you know the history of it much more than I, but I understand that it was used as a custard stand for some time, and maybe it's had some other uses over time. There have been some referrals to this building as the Crab Shack. And so I'm not aware if it historically was a crab shack, because, or if that is part of what's been discussed with this application, because that's what has been presented in the application area. Yes. And if you look at it, there's the hotel just to the west. There's a single family dwelling to the south. That's the single family dwelling. That's also owned by the applicants. Right. The subject property, this is a picture of, which is showing up a little bit faded on the screen. But, well, quite a bit faded on the screen. If you look at the arrow where the subject property is shown, that area is identified on the future land use map, and that area also includes, well, it includes property that it's referred to as a historic resort commercial district. And this is in the central area, which you can tell, central area part of the land use plan. It encompasses all of the parcels along Washington Avenue, areas over to the boardwalk, and a smaller section up towards Colonial Avenue. The future land use map for this area states that future land uses are intended to provide recreational and business opportunities designed to foster tourism. The plan says that mixed use development and commercial and residential should preserve the historic integrity of the area. The plan provides that the area has always had a wide range of land uses and is the historic commercial area of the town. The plan states that currently, and this is true, there's a mix of commercial establishments in the area, mostly retail and restaurants and hospitality businesses, and there are some residential units in the area. The plan provides that with new investments in the area, efforts are ongoing to target this area for continued revitalization and as a key focus of economic development. The plan further provides that the Colonial Beach Commercial Historic District designation will incentivize rejuvenating much of the central area. As an area for planned recreational and business opportunities designed to foster tourism, it is important that these uses are respectful to the surrounding properties. The plan provides this, and it should also consider the overall historic character of the area to mitigate any negative impacts. In the RC district of the zoning ordinance, the ordinance refers to this area as the downtown beachfront intended to provide an attractive, viable resort area for tourists. This slide is of the applicant's conceptual plan. And so if you see the plan in the background, that is the engineered plan that the applicant submitted with their application, which was required. I zoomed in on the portion of their engineered plan, which shows the subject property. And if you see that on the screen, you see the words old storefront on that subject property. So there's the subject property. As we talked about before, that white building that we looked at on the aerial photograph, that's shown here as the old storefront, and then you see the shed building behind it. The applicants are proposing to lease the subject property to a mobile vendor who would bring in a maximum of 2 mobile vending vehicles to the property. This is, and if you look at the slide, there you can see 2 mobile vending unit areas that are proposed. Yes, there and there.
All right, so one more time, point to where the actual mobile vending portions are, because on there, it's, on what I have. on
It's very
screen,
lots.
It's a little easier,
Yeah.
but it's the one right there by the crab shack, and it's the small one.
It might be one.
That was B1, and then the other one is 2.
That one. That one,
Mhm.
okay, and that one, those are the 2 mobile vending units.
Yes.
Okay.
The area that is just south of the existing building, the Crab Shack building. That's the area where they propose the picnic tables,
Okay,
where they intend to have 3 wooden picnic tables with seating for approximately 16 people.
and the other spaces where they're planning on parking employee golf carts, is that correct?
Yes, in the back side of the property, they are showing a grassed area that would be for employee parking.
Right.
And the applicants have provided that the employees would only drive golf carts to the site. So there would not be any allowance for any motor vehicles on the subject property.
Right.
They propose, there is a chain link fence along a portion of the front of the property, and you'll see that in a picture in a minute, but so from Beach Terrace, they have the ability to have a gate that can open
A walk in.
there, and that's where they propose to let patrons come in
Okay.
to the site.
And that's also the location for the double fence for getting the trailers in and out and the golf carts in and out, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So other than designating the areas that you see on the conceptual plan, the applicants have proposed no site improvements except for the addition of the picnic tables. And they are proposing to operate the use from daily, year-round, as weather permits, obviously, with the hours of operation from 9 AM to 9 PM. And they're proposing extended hours on holidays and special events in the town. The application didn't identify what those hours would be, so staff made some recommendations relative to those extended hours and the conditions, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. You know, the chain link fence, again, the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Langdorf, own the property to the south. And they have vegetation along that property line. They've said that there are 4 forsythia bushes along that property line, and there are 2 trees otherwise on the property. That they're saying they, hadn't proposed any additional landscaping at this point, but we will talk a little bit more about, as you're thinking about a conditional use, it's important from a staff standpoint that you give consideration of trying to mitigate the impacts of a proposed use on the surrounding properties. And so then as we go through the conditions, we'll talk about that a little bit more. In addition, relative to public utilities, the applicants have indicated that the existing structure labeled on their plan. Yes, the store front, and people refer to it as the crab shack, is connected to public utilities, water, and electricity. They have provided that the employees will use the bathroom located in this structure, that the mobile vending vehicles will have water tanks that will be filled with water hoses outside of normal business hours as needed. And in addition, the applicant stated that Blue Boys waste will be used when needed for wash water. The applicants state that the anticipate that 40 gallons per day will be needed. So when looking at conditional use permits, the zoning ordinance provides guidance to you and to council. The zoning ordinance provides that conditional uses may be issued provided that the governing body finds that the use will not affect the health or safety of persons residing or working in the area of the proposed use. That the use would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the area. And that the use will not be in conflict with the purposes of the comprehensive plan. So this is a look from Hawthorne across an adjacent property, which is a grassed area, into the subject property. Beach Terrace, obviously you can see the water in the picture, that's where Beach Terrace. And so looking into the property from the adjacent property that fronts along Hawthorne. And you can see the front building, which is the crab shack, the shed building behind it. And then the there are the 2 mobile vending units are sitting on the property now. I don't believe they're hooked up to anything, but they are located on the subject property. Next slide, please. This is looking into the subject property. This picture was taken this afternoon. That's the crab shack building. Obviously the adjacent residential use to the left of the screen. And then behind these flutter flags, you can see the mobile units that are back there. The gate, the chain link fence that we talked a little bit about earlier, that where employees can go in. I became aware of the flutter flags today when the pictures were taken. So we don't have a condition in the case yet that speaks to the flutter flags, but I do think that it's, because we didn't know they were there, but I do think it's important as we continue to discuss this, that there is a condition that says the only signage that will be used on the property will be in compliance. We'll add that. We could actually add that to the signage condition, but that would apply to use of signage such as these flutter flags. The ordinance requires a permit.
Right, and that's just in accordance with the same signage ordinances we have for the rest of the businesses in town. It should all be the same, correct?
Yes, it is. It is absolutely the same and would apply to this property as well.
Right.
Next slide. So this is just another view into the property. We were trying to get, there's a lot of work going on over there. So staff was dodging some work going on to get these pictures, but this is just another view into the subject property. And you can see that there are a couple of picnic tables out there, and I think they'll have some more. And next slide, please. After analyzing this request, staff does recommend approval, but that approval is subject to the conditions in attachment A in the report. As conditioned, the proposed commercial use of the property complies with the future land use map. Recommendations of the town's comprehensive plan, which suggests the property is appropriate for recreational and business opportunities designed to foster tourism. The property was historically occupied by a carryout type restaurant known as I don't know what it was known as, the custard stand, the rainbow, something someone mentioned one time. Anyway, so it has been used in the past for these, and probably historically when we didn't know, in the existing structure on site. Now, the mobile vending vehicles are really, you know, in staff's opinion, more temporary type structures. And So if these vending vehicles are gonna be used, I think, in these temporary type structures, it is going to be important for those vending vehicles as well as the site to be well maintained. And so there are conditions in this request, in the case that are recommended by staff with the intent of ensuring that, you know, you're taking a temporary type structure and making it a permanent use on the property. And so there are conditions here that are intended to try to mitigate any negative impacts that might have. But if it is well maintained and the vehicles are maintained as well as the site, then the use would complement the central beach area. And then finally, while there are several impacts to consider with locating mobile vending courtyards such as noise, odors, trash, and aesthetics, as conditions, staff believes that the impact on the area properties should be minimized. Now, we can talk a little bit about the conditions. The conditional use as proposed by staff would be granted to the applicants exclusively and would not run with the land. You do have the option as a commission, if it's something that you're considering that you want to look at to see if this is something that does work in this area and is a good idea in this area, you have the ability to recommend to council that a condition maybe would be appropriate to give a period of time to look at the appropriateness of a use like this. However, staff does recommend that it would be appropriate to grant it to the applicants exclusively, and we're offering that it not run with the land. The reason for that would be if the next person who comes in, if they desire for this to have the same use on the property, it may not be configured exactly the same. It may not be operated exactly the same. And there's an ability to come back forward before the town, before planning commission and council to seek approval of a conditional use permit with whatever changes they propose. Excuse me. So we have a condition that would limit the maximum number of units to 2. And that they would be located as they're shown on the conceptual plan. If they want to come in and start moving locations around and moving things around outside of the concept plan, they would need to come back before. That is basically covers conditions 2 and 3. Each vendor for that's going to have a unit there, and I understand right now there's one leasee. In the future, there could be other leases, that they would have to comply, obviously, with all the Department of Health regulations and any other local, state, or federal laws. And that each mobile vendor, when they are going to come onto the property, would need to obtain a zoning permit from the Community Development Department prior to locating their unit on the property. That would apply also to the 2 that are sitting there now. So before they're operational, they need to obtain a zoning permit. And in the condition, there's some requirements about what's needed, what we would need to verify. And that is obviously compliance with the health department license requirement, a list of the items that are proposed for sale, identified site 1 or 2 on the conceptual plan, provide us the detail about the vendor vehicle itself. And then we'd like to talk about external lighting, right? And find out for that unit, you know, what external lighting do they have? We're not intending, there are some security lighting. There is security lighting on site. I think there are 2 poles there. That's the lighting that staff would suggest would be enough. But there may be some other types of lighting. I've seen these, you know, places where there's some decorative lighting and that kind of thing. We want to understand that from a staff standpoint to make sure it's not so much. So it still helps to maintain it as something that's compatible to the surrounding area, especially adjacent residential uses. And then I talked with, the applicant had stated, you know, we feel like that the existing vegetation may be enough to provide, you know, mitigate any impacts and not being so concerned because they own the adjacent property. But from a staff standpoint, you know, we feel like that there does need to be transitional screening between a use like this that is largely an outside use. I mean, its activities are outside. So we felt like that, but we also know that the applicants are looking forward to going forward and getting started. So rather than saying, let's put everything on hold while you give us a landscaping plan, condition 6 says that within 30 days of today, they can submit a landscaping plan. We'll work with them to get it approvable. And I say landscape, it's landscaping and screening. So we can work that out. And then they will have, once that plan is approved, they'd have 60 days to install that landscaping. And we felt like that was a fair compromise. So we also are recommending that the food trucks, while they're not proposed now, they're proposed now by the applicants to be located on a grass surface. Condition 7 would require that those two spots for the mobile vending units would be gravel surface. And we felt like that would be assist with pedestrian safety, safe access for the pedestrians up to the windows, that kind of thing. And that they also would show us how that they are going to accommodate physically challenged persons to get up and access the use. In number 8, we are agreeing that we're not going to look for them now to provide, you know, some sort of surface for the pedestrian areas. It is a grass property, but we are saying that it becomes a problem. You know, hopefully they'll have so many customers that the grass will just go away. And so we would look at that and monitor that, because we don't want that to become a problem, you know, tracking muddy on other properties. And what? Yeah, for soil and erosion problems, and also from an aesthetic standpoint. And then with condition 9, this condition would say that if at some point the mobile vending courtyard is not used, and it has a time frame in here right now, if it ceases to be used for 45 days, or if the mobile vending vehicle itself becomes in disrepair, it's not repaired, and that kind of thing becomes unsafe, then they would need to be removed from the property within 15 days at the expense of the property owner, not the town, obviously. Then we have a condition that says the use of public address system and loudspeakers or other sound devices shall not be permitted. That amplified music might be played in the courtyard, provided that it's not audible beyond the subject property boundaries. And then we also are saying that they're allowed to have signage. Right, this signage that we're talking about being allowed did not include the flutter flags. However, they are allowed to have that type of signage unless you all disagree with that. Right now, the signage that would be allowed are an A-frame or an H-frame style sign. That's basically what people refer to as a sandwich shop, sandwich board. And that would be 8 square feet area with a maximum height of 4 feet. And that would be allowed to be up during the operation, but not at other times. And then obviously there's the ability to have a sign attached to the mobile vending unit, which would have the menu and prices. And that's customarily to what you see. So as it's written right now, and this is, I guess you guys need to weigh in on that, they would be allowed this signage for this conditional use. The next condition 12 deals with removing trash, keeping it free of trash and daily, and that all trash must be kept in an enclosed container and removed from the site regularly to contain owners and not proliferate insects or rodents. The mobile vending courtyard would be operated so it doesn't create unhealthy conditions regarding water supply, sewage disposal, or solid waste disposal. Then you have 14 that deals with it not having an adverse impact on public health, safety, welfare, or convenience in the town. 15 is the severability condition, which is standard. 16, if we talked about the lights, so that there are those 2 existing light poles, if anything else is proposed, they need to come forward and get permits for that, and we need to look at a plan. And then the last condition, 17, deals with the hours of operation, and we're suggesting that when holidays or in conjunction with town approved festivals, then they would be allowed to be open until 11 p.m. And so with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Now, let me say one more thing. Staff is not opposed to them being allowed to have the photo flags. But it needs to, if they do have them, then they need to be permitted. They need to be in compliance with the timeframes allowed in the ordinance. And then also the number, because right now the number that's out there exceeds the number permitted by the ordinance. I'm not sure what the height is of the ones that are out there, but the ordinance limits the height to 10 feet.
So my opinion on flutter flags is they should be in accordance with town ordinance. It's already standing town ordinance. However, other signage, the A-frame sign, which advertises what it is, I think it probably lists the 2 or the 3 if they're going to use because my understanding is they're also going to use the existing building.
Yes.
So it could list the existing business or building business and the other 2, something to that effect. But I think before we get too super far deep into that, are the Langdorfs here? Would you mind stepping up? I think we're probably gonna have a couple of questions for you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how are you? I read through all of this and the proposal that you sent in that was attached to it and all that, so relatively familiar with it, obviously not like you are or they are, but so I only had a couple of small questions. So the Blue Boy that you're talking about, is that a service or is that a unit thing?
I'm gonna ask Richard Donovan, who was the lessee, to join me.
The Blue Boy is the same thing that your campers and stuff use. It's the same thing as the campers and stuff use. Wastewater goes into it, and I take it.
I got you. So it's just basically a portable disposable unit. Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much for that one. The other one is, I think you listed in your description that rather than gravel, you were gonna have at least one of the trailers or trucks or on blocks rather than on gravel. And then the question to that becomes, is that kind of like RV style blocks where it's pretty easy to just pop it off there, or how permanent does that make it?
No, what it is, it's just to stabilize it. The wheels and axles are still under them.
Okay.
It's just we jack them up so they're not set solid on the wheels. Stabilize them in four corners. That's what the blocks are for.
Gotcha.
So whenever people are walking around and this stuff, you're not shaking back and forth. It's just stabilized.
Yeah, I just needed the clarification on it because I couldn't visualize it for some reason. So thank you very much for that. I think that's the primary questions I had for them. Anyone else? I see you clearly have a question.
I did have questions, but I didn't know if we wanted to take public comment first. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you very much. We may have more questions for you after public comment. It's entirely possible. So,
Mr. Chairman, I might offer that if the applicants want to make a presentation, or if they have any comments that they'd like to make, to allow them to do that, it would be appropriate at this time.
do you?
Sure, well, it's very impressive, the level of detail that was put in by the town and in preparation for this and educating in terms of the requirements to make sure that this was in the best interest of the town, of course. And my husband Jason and I, so the Carruthers, Ellie and Doc Carruthers and Doc's parents, they invested in the town over 40 years. They first built their home in 1933, and then they acquired and built properties along the way. And so in the spirit of them, we had the honor of purchasing the home at 20 Beach Terrace next to Miss Ellie while she was still with us, and learned all about the town, fell more in love with the town. In fact, we chose to buy that house in part because of watching that YouTube of Miss Ellie. So she really inspired us. And so we're not developers, we're not independently wealthy. We come from humble background and we put every penny we have into the investments. And just like the Carruthers, we renovated 20 Beach Terrace because we love old buildings and we historic charm that character. And we think that the work that we're doing really complements well the new development that's happening to put together both new development and the charm of that old town. We completely renovated 20 Beach Terrace, then followed by Miss Ellie's house at 15 North Irving, brought it up to today's standards. The custard stand, but we know it as the custard stand. It's such an oddly placed building that's been not in good shape, as everyone who's seen it knows. We met with we were like, it could be a little restaurant. We met with different restaurant owners and they really had no interest. They were like, sink lots of money in it and then maybe we'll consider it. So that was a little scary. And then when Richard Donovan approached us, and had the idea of it, and if you don't know, Mr. Donovan actually was a food court vendor on the boardwalk when the food trucks were still there. He then experienced the shift to Town Hill to get that experience as well. And not only does he have the food truck experience with the town, but he also has decades and decades of him and his family being in construction. So he said, I would love to, he's had such a passion about it, to renovate that building. And I think it would serve very well to have 2 food trucks to create a little food court. And that we didn't even think about that until then, but it's almost like it's meant to be a food court in terms of the awkward position of that building, to restore that, to bring it back to what it once was, and then add space for the food trucks and a little place for people to enjoy that. So we're very excited about the opportunity, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to the public input for this particular issue. So for the conditional use permit, public hearing, public comment, we will start with, it looks like Mike Fitzpatrick again.
Sure, just for the record, we're opening up the public hearing, correct?
Yes, we are opening the public hearing for the conditional use permit at 6:31.
Great, and the microphone's on this time, right?
Yes,
Hopefully you heard what I said the
We
last
did.
time. All right, good. Chairman, I'd like to ask, I'm actually representing the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Committee, so I'm not sure if your rules are like the town council where I can have 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes. If not, I'll try to speak very, very quickly. But if you'll indulge me, I've got a couple things to say on this. First off, I'd like to remind many of you that I have spoken about this 2 years ago and actually presented to the town council on the strong need for a food court here in town. I put together the feasibility, the conceptual, and the business rationale behind why we should move forward with trying to promote a food court here in Colonial Beach and the needs for it. I still stand by that. 2 years later, I'm extremely frustrated that we are where we are. We've gone from bad to worse, to be quite honest with you. And we now have, after trying to generate a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about many food vendors coming to Colonial Beach, we've shut them down 2 years in a row. And I think it demonstrates very strongly that the town should not be in the food business industry or food court business. It should be held in private hands. And right now, our ability to promote this privately is very challenged. And you heard from Mr. Griffey, who's another person here who's trying to do a very similar thing. And would you create a food court if it was gonna cost you $88,000 to hook up water to it? I don't think so. There's no business plan that makes any sense for that whatsoever. 2 lots, 40-some thousand dollars a piece to put 6 or 8 food courts on there, or food trucks on there. So anyway, I want to say I'm completely in favor of approving this and moving forward with it. I think it's a start for the town, but we need to be doing a whole lot more. And I would really hope that the planning commission is going to do their part to help drive this and take this out of the town's hands and put it into private citizens' hands by making it much easier to be able to do this. So a couple things. One thing I'm gonna say, I'm a little shocked that it's been operating down there the last couple of weeks. I've walked by, I've taken pictures, they're selling hot dogs and it's operational prior to this meeting. So that concerns me a little bit that that's been going on. But that being said, I'm still in favor and certainly want to support this and move forward. I think we need to make it a lot easier. Now that if we get this first one under our belt, I'm hoping that you all can help facilitate this CUP process and not create so much paperwork and so much. I mean, this is expensive to get these drawings done, to get the surveys done, and then when you throw the water fees on top of that, it becomes completely untenable for somebody to move forward. It's a deal killer. Also, one of the things from staff recommendations that I would like you to think about is the transfer of the CUP. My experience is when someone gets a conditional use permit for like a bed and breakfast or whatever, that property, that conditional use permit transfers forward. And I would like, and you can keep all the stipulations that it has to be exactly like the way it is, but I'd like to be able to see it potentially be able to move forward. If I was buying a business and I didn't know if I could use it as a food court, I'd be nervous about buying that if I had to go through a conditional use permit process. So you can keep all the rules and stipulations that you've got in place here, but I would say it should transfer. That's my opinion. And then also on the flutter flags, I don't understand what the issue is with this, quite honestly, in town. They're all up and down everywhere. Are you going to make Lenny's take theirs down and Buzz take theirs down and Boom Boom take theirs down and everybody else? I think as long as they're not impeding traffic or disrupting anything and they're off the property within reason, I think that you should allow them to take place. Okay, and that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Nelson.
Eric Nelson, 1321 Lossing Avenue. And I'm going to echo some of what Mike has just said. I also have spoken on behalf of food truck courts in the downtown area. As a real estate agent, I am keenly aware of what visitors to this town and what potential buyers of property in this town are looking for when they come into this town. And they're looking for a vibrant economy here, lots of choices for food and retail items, and having a food truck court in this town is a perfect example of the type of thing that people are looking for. And I have also spoken on behalf of the Griffey's efforts to do a food truck court across the street here, and I'm certainly in favor of the Langdors efforts to try to put a food truck court in their property. I'd also like to comment a little bit on the Langdors. I've known them for quite some time. I'm familiar with their passion for the town, their passion for Doc's Motor Courts and for Ellie herself, and I know that their intentions and their desires are to try to revitalize that entire Doc's Motor Court area, which includes Ellie's house, which they have renovated. It includes the food truck court area, the old crab shack or custard stand. And I know at some point in the near future, they're also going to start working on the motor court itself. So I applaud them. I think that their passion for this town, their passion for trying to renovate an iconic place like Dots Motor Court is a terrific thing for this town. It sort of preserves the history while also energizing the economic vitality of the town. So I support their efforts. And also would echo what Mike says about trying to reduce the amount of red tape that's required for other kinds of efforts like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Griffey.
Griffey, 157 Shellfield. I too will echo some of what Derek and Mike said. I'm going to speak to the application, cup application, and what the applicant had to go through. There are 2 pages of requirements, 26 individual items that have to be shown on the site plan or general development plan. There's not room for that. There's no guidance as to how one should have this done. The applicant, I'm sure, went through many hours and days of trying to find a way to make this happen. And what I think we need to do is, what we need is an entirely different cup application. And I know that you've made some recommendations to make some changes. One, which was, if I understood it correctly, was somewhat significant. You can now make a cup application without a site plan, is my understanding. For the last year, we have been talking with we've been talking with zoning about how best to go about this, and we always needed this general development plan and survey in order to submit an application. So that changed, if I read it right, to allow application without all that work being done. I would recommend, along with some other changes, because there's so many things in that 28-page list that aren't necessary and are not shown in this application. In addition to that, they had to provide a narrative as to all these things. And after going through that for weeks and months, it looks like they're being approved subject to yet an additional 17 items. The system can be better, and I think the town needs to provide some guidance to those applicants wishing to do this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. David Williams.
David Williams, Irving, 1535 Irving Avenue. Good evening, everybody. Just my personal perspective, I've been working with the town. I even did a presentation about a year ago on food trucks and the ordinances and stuff that town should maybe consider when letting them in. And so I wasn't crazy about the conditional use permit process and them being allowed in town to have food truck courts. I'm not against what's going on, or the town if they choose to do that. The only thing I would urge is that you please consider possibly an expiration date on this, or an annual renew or something, because right now, yeah, food trucks may be all fad, and maybe, you know, we love the idea, but we could be opening up Pandora's box if we just allow them everywhere in town with conditional use permits. So I just urge, I personally would have loved it if the town just allowed a permit for a place on private property without going through this whole process. And then if you want one, say on First Street, or one on Colonial Avenue, or one here, you get a permit for a year. And then if it works out, great, give them another permit next year. If it doesn't, then don't. But they wouldn't listen to me. But so that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Langford.
May I make one comment, please?
Sure.
In terms of the town feedback, to make it clear, the food truck has not been in operation whatsoever. The custard stand, the existing structure with an existing cup with an existing use, was revitalized, restored, building inspector came. And that's what was used for the past 2 weeks, not the food truck has not been in operation. So the flag, the waivers, whatever they are called, they were promoting the custard stand existing structure. Oh, sorry, you called me because my name.
Because you're on the list.
Sorry. I foresaw that I needed to come and make that comment. No, I just put our name on there. I didn't know what the process would be, just in case we needed to speak.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Do I need to stay for questions or anything?
If we have any, yeah, there's one more person on the list, and then there's probably gonna be some after that, so if you're planning on running out of the building. You can take a break before you do. Okay, Will Knuckles.
Will Knuckles, 204 Monroe Bay Avenue. Yeah, we need a real food truck plan. The idea of punching this through the cut process is far from ideal, and we're gonna keep asking a bunch of what would certainly, this is a land use sort of planning body exercise, and we're gonna continue to, as these projects come up, all these are gonna be one-off operational questions that we're asking that really seem to be a bit far afield from actually like planning exercise, which is what the cut process is supposed to really be connected to. So hopefully we can get out of this process. That's it for this particular one. As far as impact on neighbors and just general quality of life in that part of town, generators are bad. I would hope that we consider requiring connections to shore power rather than allowing something that's going to generate noise and potential pollution impacts. Every time that they're operating seems like a reasonable requirement. I don't understand the staff's requirement for a gravel pad. Turf is actually ideal if we're talking about pervious surface, like actually allowing infiltration. Gravel's better than concrete, but it's still not ideal. I don't understand what we're actually achieving. Since we're talking about, from what I can tell, a vehicle that's not coming and going. So we're calling these mobile, but this isn't very mobile. Really, we're talking about a structure that just has axles and doesn't move constantly. So I don't know that we're really achieving something by asking the applicant. If the applicant, on the other hand, wanted to ask for a parking pad or some sort of a hard structure, then that would just go through the regular process. But it seems strange as part of the CUP zoning process to ask for a gravel pad. Golf cart parking is an interesting concept, but it seems to be kind of half-baked. We're not fully developed in this town. Look at the stuff that's on Madison Avenue now, where we created a bunch of golf cart parking areas, but they're really too small for a bunch of golf. We have people that are parking over because they're not sized really for some golf carts or some slow speed vehicles. So until we get the size thing worked out to where it actually functions, just call it a vehicle parking place and not introduce the golf cart complexity, because it's clear that we haven't figured this out yet as a town, is that how to make what we're calling a golf cart spot work. Just make it a vehicle thing. Go for normal, right? We have flexibility to do it. Hours of operation, the concept of 9 to 9 and then 9 to 11 on holidays and town approved festival. I don't know the town approved festival is even a codified term in the town, so I'm not certain that how you build that in. And the concept of holidays, because the holiday calendar falls not just on what you would think of, like, oh, like the Monday of 4th of July, it doesn't really work that way, right? Holidays pop up in random days of the week as it goes through the government official holiday calendar. I don't understand the value of that, why you would extend it just on those days. I also don't understand why you would start at 9, because it's sort of saying like almost breakfast. Like, again, from a zoning sort of land use point of view, don't know why we're kind of going for brunch, it just seems to be, that's an odd requirement, I think, in the CUP process. And I think if you're fine with 11 o'clock on a number of days in the year, why would you have it sort of like on off? I don't know that if your goal is to try to impact the livability and impact on that area of town, I would say you go with one or the other. The variability thing seems strange.
Thank you. Thank you. That was your time. Okay, that was everybody we had on the list for the conditional use permit, public hearing portion.
It's at the chair's prerogative to close the public hearing when bills is appropriate.
Certainly. Seeing as how this is a seems to be rather hot topic. I am gonna put it out to see, do we have anyone else that came in late that wanted to comment on this? Yes.
Woods Vaughn, I live on 2 Hill Bottom Drive in Colonial Beach. I am the business owner of the Riverview Inn. I'm on the chamber board and also the EDC. While I am all for business and growth in this town, I would like you to consider this because across the board, I think we need to be fair to all businesses. We have a couple of food truck courts that have been kind of battling back and forth here. So I hope that that is looked at across the board. First of all, according to the zoning ordinance, there is a 5-day prior written notice adjoining property owners, and that's us. And this is the first that I've heard about this. The Riverview Inn backs up to the property that the landlords own. And I have 2 rooms that right now view the back of this lot that they have the food trucks in. I'm not against it, but I am asking that there be some kind of screen or vegetation because it's not fair for my guests to look in the back of a food truck. Second of all, the noise and the generators are a concern along with sewer and water. And my other concern is the noise factor for the hours that they are operating. So I would like you to please take that into consideration.
Thank you. Okay, we will now close the public hearing at 6:49 p.m. Right, so for the commission, I'm gonna start all the way over on the left. We can start over there, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, we'll start there and we'll work our way across. Work?
I don't think I have any questions for any of that.
Okay. Ms. Lunder.
I am in strong support of the mobile vending food court, and I definitely hope to see more of those come forward, and I would like to see the process simplified and streamlined if possible. I think it's very frustrating when I've heard speakers say waiting for 2 years. I think that there's a way that we could look at this and maybe, augment it and streamline it a little bit. And also looking at the golf carts in terms of making sure that golf carts are brought onto the property and not vehicles, because there's not, the vehicles were not included in the RPA requirement of no more than 36% coverage. So that would be a problem, I think, if vehicles were to come on to the property. And maybe we can address that question, at some point.
Just in reference to that, not to steal your thunder, I think the only golf carts they're talking about are the employee vehicles.
Yes. Right.
Strict.
And that would be my concern, because not everybody that works in town has, or lives in town, or works in town, lives here. So it could be employees are coming in from other areas and don't have golf carts. So the stipulation that no vehicles other than the vehicles needed to bring the mobile trucks in are allowed to stay parked on the lot.
I think they also stipulated that they were providing golf carts for their employees to drive to.
Yes, and my only concern is if they live in King George or somewhere else, they're not going to be able to drive their golf cart here. So that's all I'm saying, just a, concern over not seeing vehicles parked on the lot. And then a couple other quick things. I think that this is absolutely something that we need to see more of, and I'm very supportive of that. Did have a question about some of the issues relating to the screening. I think our speaker talked about the need for creating, a more maintained and privacy there. So I think that if we could look at requirement for screening in that situation, I think that if that's a possibility to add that. And the other thing was the lighting. I realized that there are two sources of lighting for the mobile vending for food court, but in the packet that was sent out, there was a really lovely picture of a mobile vending food court that had not just ornamental lighting, but almost like, you know, it had an ambience, but it also provided almost a security lighting as well. And my concern is that lighting would be important, especially as we get into the season in the winter, when it gets dark early, that lighting be available beyond just you know, the two lighting sources that have been identified. Again, just looking at the issue of noise, so that there's not, you know, an abundance of noise, too much noise from any of the mobile trucks that are advertising or whatever, and playing loud music and so on. Just being sensitive to the surrounding neighborhood and being good neighbors, I think, is going to be important. And it's going to set the precedent for other food truck courts that come in. Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Most of my thoughts were around the requirements for additional impervious surface, and look at obviously easily use some alternatives for soil and erosion control that, you know, even if it's artificial turf or geotech mats or anything like that, it would serve the same purpose, but it would not require impervious surface, and it would still enhance foot traffic and accessibility. Kind of going back to the nuisance of adjacent properties with the amplification of music, a lot, it may not be intended at this point in time, but there's a lot of, especially in the resort commercial areas, live music that happens. I'd like to consider not necessarily limiting music audible beyond the boundaries, but definitely put in a nuisance kind of clause, because it is adjacent to the hotel, but as long as it's within a, you know, reasonable time frame, I think we need to make allowances for that. Let's see, of course, the signage, as long as all the signage is in compliance with the signage ordinance, I think it's kind of redundant. And then the lighting, I don't think that going all out on a proposed lighting plan, if they want to string some Edison lights, is necessarily appropriate, because there's existing lighting. But if there's anything permanent or substantially altering the lighting conditions there, then that would qualify. And then I'm really kind of conflicted. I get the evening cutoff time, but I'm not really sure about the morning cutoff time, because it shouldn't be, in my opinion, any different than our noise and nuisance ordinance.
If I might answer that question, the applicants proposed the time.
Okay.
That came from the applicants.
Perfect. That's all my.
Except for the extension for the 11 p.m. We added that because there was no time for ending, so staff added the 11 p.m. for holidays. And town approved festivals, which there is a festival permit that a person is required to get through the town. So the applicants, you know, if they wanted to open earlier, again, this was based on their proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, most of my questions are for staff. It's on. It's on. Okay, conditional, I'm sorry, not run with the land. I kind of understand if you, I understand both extremes of that. What I'm wondering is there's any in between thing. In other words, let's say the folks now running the property want to turn it over and sell to somebody else. Can it be possible to allow the same use to occur and not still run with the land? In other words, I assume run with the land means is for now and forever going to be that particular use. And now, so could you straighten me out on that?
Yes, sir, that is correct. The condition, if the conditional use is approved with no limitation, then it is there unless it gets revoked for some reason that's also allowed in the zoning ordinance by the governing body. But if the conditional use is approved without the condition, the language in number 1, it would run with the land. So Ms. Langdorf could sell it to the next person, who could sell it to the next person. And they would still be subject to the conditions of this approval. The conditions of approval for number 2 says that it's for 2 units, they must comply with the conceptual plan. If they propose any changes to that, they would have to come back. So the concern that you're expressing is addressed in the conditions if it was the desire of the commission to remove condition 1.
Well, that's not really my concern. My concern was to make it easy for people to turn the business over to someone who wants to do the same business. Now, and it seems to me like you would have to change this to make it go run with the land.
If condition 1 stays in place, yes, sir. Then the next person would need to come in and get a conditional use. If you remove condition 1 out of the recommended conditions, then they would not need to come back through a conditional use unless they were proposing to make changes so that their use was not in compliance with the conceptual plan that's been approved or in making any other changes. So they would be subject to these conditions.
Okay, now I also noticed that one thing in this cup situation is that something needs to be recorded with the county. Now, am I wrong on that one?
No, not at this time. There's a separate ordinance that we'll be talking about tonight that's last on the agenda that would propose that for.
Okay, so it's not in place now?
That's correct. That would have no place in this application.
Okay. Well, I really understand people not wanting to have to go through the cup process if we're gonna do the same business, So in that sense, I'd like to see it run with the land. So you're just saying, oh, if that's what I want, then I should convince the rest of the committee to delete number 1. Is that what you said?
Mr. Christensen, one of the things that I would say in my history of dealing with land use is that one of the things that a locality uses sometimes because is either a time limit on a conditional use permit or a condition like this that would say, okay, if Mr. and Mrs. Langdorf own this for 50 years, great. But it allows for a window of opportunity for the town to take a look and see if this use, given what may have changed around it, if this use is still an appropriate use on the subject property. So that's one of the reasons why you see staff recommending conditions that either have a time limit or are issued to one person versus another. And again, it has also to do with accountability.
So I'm kind of hearing that you're saying there is a middle process. If you set kind of a time limit, I'm not sure how that is going to enable them to sell to a second party and have them do the same thing without going through a cup, which is what I implied.
Right, if it was we're trying to be more lenient than saying, okay, if this conditional use is for 2 years, The condition is proposing to be more lenient than that by not putting a time limit on it. However, if it is your desire that the next person that comes in does not need to get a conditional use at all, then you would remove condition 1 from your recommendation.
Okay, well, I'll leave that and we can discuss that as the committee, as a commission. It was interesting that because I thought I'd be the only one to bring this up, but it's already been discussed twice. I don't see why those trucks can't sit on a grassy place. I know it, they were actually covering something up, so it's, I suppose it would be considered a non-permeable surface, but I can't see any problem with the grass if the cars are really the trucks are really gonna be sitting there and just leveled out and they still have wheels and as far as the paths, you know, I mean, my ideal would be that, yeah, the trucks sit on the grass and where they need walkways between the trucks and the entrance to the property. They put in permeable pavers. That would be my choice. It would look nice, and it would be nice as far as retaining water. I guess that's just more of an opinion, but I don't see why we're requiring them to put in gravel. And number 8. Oh, okay. I guess I already covered number 8. I just said my opinion would be that would sure be nice to have permeable pavers there. But I do want to add what they're proposing to do, in my opinion, is so important to the town, is that they are taking a property that is not being used at this time and putting it to use. They are doing the same thing that the Vaughns did with the Review Inn, the same thing that others have done up and down the street right here that I never heard the name of. But anyway, that's so important to this town, and so thank you very much to the Langdorfs, and that's what's going to make this town better for everybody, that we get that downtown area active, and it's happening, and I thank everybody involved.
Asking my questions and comments are in public.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a couple of things that have come up from. Oh, yeah, Bailey, I'm sorry, because I didn't see your face. I completely forgot about you, so you have the floor.
No worries. I don't have any questions at this time, though.
Okay, awesome. So my questions and comments are based not only on what was provided by staff and folks who had their comment, but also from what came up from the other members. So a thing that came up that I think was very important was the screening issue. I fully agree that there's no reason why tenants at the hotels should have to be living at the back of food trucks or any other mobile vending vehicle should it be there. So I think having the provision in here for the landscaping plan so that it can be approved and implemented, I think is a critical thing that we need to make sure stays. As far as generator noise, I don't think that was addressed anywhere in the conditions. So I think encouraging the use of shore power is certainly something that I would encourage. And since it is private property, you know, they can install a power drop. I mean, it's the property owner's, you know, right to install an appropriate power drop, I would think. And then maybe the lessee helps to compensate for the cost of the power drop or something. I mean, you guys could work that out between yourselves. Plus, it would probably be cheaper for you to run off shore power than it would be to have to gas up generators all the time. Anyway, I would think. So I would think switching over to shore power sooner rather than later would be the thing we should. I think we should put in there. Right, and that goes along with the portion that we had about noise and sound. Although I think as far as the music is concerned, I have to agree with the concept that there's a lot of live music in the town and also in that area. So I think if they were to have music specifically, maybe like a small entertainer at the front of the lot playing some music during reasonable hours, I don't see why that would be an issue. I would think it should be not at the back of the lot where it's adjacent to the hotel. But they're not gonna have customers in the back of the lot anyway, so I think they wouldn't have any problem agreeing with that. I also agree that this process should be easier. I thought when we kind of started going through this mobile vending courtyard thing, I didn't realize it was gonna be that the process was going to be quite so involved as it is. So I think, you know, if we could make that easier, I think if we can take that on ourselves to make that a little more streamlined and easier, I think that would be a good thing. Because again, I think having that where it is great. You're going to be the closest food to the beach. So I think you're going to have, you know, a great turnaround as far as traffic and people coming in and using it. And from what I understood from reading the narrative, what you're going to be serving is perfect for the beach. People are going to be all over it. And it's something that I think is definitely going to be very positive. And if we can make this easier so we can do it in other places in the town, I think that would be great too. As far as transferability of the cup. Is there any way that we can put some kind of a provision in that provides for an application of transfer? If that makes sense, because rather than having someone who's going to do the exact, if they decide to move or something happens and they need to sell the lot and someone wants to have the exact same setup, exact same businesses, etc. on there, but now the ownership is changing. If there were a way for them to transfer the ownership of that cup while maintaining all of those same provisions, if there were no changes, if that's a possibility, I think that would be a good idea. Does that make sense? Does that exist anywhere else in any of the other things that we do?
The conditional use as the conditions are proposed. If you eliminate staff's condition 1, then if a person purchased the property and wanted to operate a mobile vending courtyard, they would be subject to meeting these conditions 2 through 17. Number 2 says the mobile vending courtyard shall be limited to the location of a maximum of 2. So that's in compliance with the conceptual plan. So if a person came in and they bought the property and they wanted to have 2 mobile vending units, they're located where they're shown on the conceptual plan. And they're making no other modifications or locating any additional vehicles there, then they're good to go. They would, you know,
They wouldn't have to go through this entire.
they would not have to go through this process. If they decided that they wanted to make changes, which is what condition 2 and condition 3 seek to.
So if they.
Then they would need to come back through this process.
So a new person comes in, buys the property, wants to maintain the business that's there, keep same setup. The only difference is the name on the deed has changed.
Yes.
They would simply come in and state, the only difference is the name on the deed has changed. Would they simply come into the office and state that, and then the name on the cup changes as well? Or
without condition 1, If you do not recommend and the council does not impose condition 1, which limits the approval to the applicants, then the cup would run with the land. So yes, they would not have to
Alright,
come back through the process.
right,
No.
and I get it, and for the sake of sanity, you don't need to say that part again, got that. What I'm trying to get to is a middle ground. Is there a methodology that exists for the transferal of ownership of the cup? There is not.
There's not.
So it's either it runs with the land or it dies when it's sold. Those are the only two options.
Under this condition, yes,
Is there another condition that exists?
there's, to get the middle ground you're talking about, no. There's basically 3 ways that a conditional use permit can be assigned.
Okay.
By, as condition 1 as to a specific landowner, the commission could put sunset clause on it, or provide a specific time frame that would have to come back for review. Or you don't assign any particular time limit to it. It just, once the conditional use permit would be approved.
And then it runs with the
Then
land.
it runs with the land, and unless the commission or the town wishes to revoke it, it would remain in perpetuity from one landowner to the next.
So can we memorialize, so you already have a severability clause in here, so going back to contracts, if you memorialize the. Permissibility of the continuity. In condition 1. Such that any subsequent landowners shall be granted a conditional use permit identical to the terms existing. No, it has to go through brand new CUP.
That's what the current ordinance requires, yes.
Okay.
Now, notwithstanding that, we can discuss potential changes to the ordinance later on tonight under that appropriate provision.
Yeah.
But
The horse and buggy
this is right.
Right.
That's correct.
Got
As we talked about, there's no middle ground.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one I have is lighting. What I see here in your conditions is if there's any change at all to the lighting that they have to come back and get it approved. Unless I'm reading that wrong. That is what it says. Is there any way to put something like with the exception of decorative or something to that effect?
There already for ornamental lighting.
Yes.
It's.
Now, you're Chair, you're referring to condition 16, correct? 16, correct? Okay, so this particular condition basically requires that the lighting for the site be reviewed and approved to the by the community development director for the review and approval to start the operation or as part of the operation. The commission could add to that condition to say that any modified lighting in the future shall be reviewed by staff. Yeah.
I think that would be much better, because the way it stands now, it looks like they have to put together an entirely huge lighting plan, etc. And if they're just gonna put some of those Edison lights up that provide a little decoration or whatever, that seems excessive to me.
It's only if they come back, what I was trying to get to is that if they come back in the future and say, hey, we want more lighting, or we want to change the lighting style, we could actually do that in-house.
Gotcha.
But they should condition that, so it doesn't go back to the commission.
Yeah, and that's what this condition says. They have to provide, it doesn't say they have to provide a lighting plan as required by the ordinance. It says they have to submit the lighting details. So whatever that's acceptable to the director will be those lighting details that they have to provide. And that's if they propose new lighting in the future. It could be clarified to say, this does not include as Mr. Howell was saying, decorative you know. I would still keep that, you know, provided that it doesn't.
And it's
you know.
downward facing, downward pointing, et cetera, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if we could do that, I think that would be great. Because if they're just gonna put up a little bit of decorative lighting, I don't see why they should need to, you know. Trucks on grass versus gravel. Now, I understand the point that you had in here is the intent for the gravel was for the stability of patrons. Is that correct? That's what it sounded like anyway.
That's what I stated. One of the other, so it was relative to, you know, the stability for the patrons. Also to when you know, gravel or will help to filter if there's spills and things like that, that will help filter greater than just going directly into the ground. So there are two parts to that.
Gotcha. So, and when you say filter, you're talking about food waste kind of things or?
Those kinds of things that are.
And, but related to the sale or production of whatever they're doing, right? Not because it's a vehicle, not vehicle kind of spillage.
Right, because it won't, I mean.
Because
it's
these are
not
just
moving,
trailers.
It's trailer, they're
Right,
trailers.
so they don't have an engine or something like
Exactly.
that, okay. I think. Which provision is the one, so I'm not digging around in this thing crazy that mentions the gravel. So I'm just sitting thinking, that's right. I don't know, I think must is just kind of a strong word for that. I think requiring them to have gravel under these, just seems unnecessary to me. I don't know about the rest of you. I also do think, I do realize that gravel, as far as, at least as far as the Chesapeake Bay Act is concerned, gravel is considered impervious. So I'd hate to count against them for even more by spreading the gravel out and all that kind of thing. Plus, it being a mobile vending courtyard, the least invasive method is not to have the gravel, so that if they choose to remove one of the trailers, or at some point, if the arrangement changes, they're now not having to scrape up ridiculous amounts of gravel just because there was a trailer right there. So I think if we could scratch that gravel portion of it, if we could reword it some way to talk about the being stabilized, right? And then talk about pedestrian access and design to accommodate physically, you know, all those kinds of things, because having a stable surface is good for that. Yes.
When I look at item 7, it seems to have really two unrelated items in here. One is where the food trucks are located, and the other one is state pedestrian access. I would like to strike any reference in number 7 to the food truck location, and have number 7 basically just saying safe pedestrian access, and the combination of physically challenged persons to be provided. That's my suggestion.
Does that make sense to?
Yeah, location of the trucks.
It's kind of, yeah, take the location out, just make sure it states that it needs to be safe for pedestrians and access. Yeah. Bailey, how do you feel about that?
I feel good about that.
Okay, so I'm good with that too. So if we could do that and just change that to be the safe and the access, that would be wonderful. Okay, I think that's everything I have. And once again, I gotta say, I agree with that this seems like a much more difficult process than maybe it ought to be. And that's probably on us figuring out a way to make it easier. because we're going with what we have right now. And the fact that we were able to get one open and then work towards hopefully getting another one open, I think is a good thing. Yes.
No, I wanted to point out that this first application is gonna be important in getting the conditions right. Because this will obviously set some precedent.
Right.
For mobile vending quotes to follow, in addition to any potential changes that we bring to the ordinance.
Okay. So as is typically the case, being the first one to do something is usually not fun. And you guys ended up stepping into that. So thank you for taking a bullet for everybody else who wants to do this in the future. And hopefully it works out for all involved.
Let me comment relevant to that, there was a mention of 17 items, it's like it was a huge burden. And, if you're gonna make that comment, I would like you specify which of these is unreasonable. I don't think any of them are unreasonable. I mean, obviously I argue with a couple of them, but the point is that most of them are just saying, come and talk to the town and we'll work it out and we'll get it right. And that's what these people over here are getting paid to do. And I know by knowing them personally that they're reasonable people. And if we approached it with the idea of both sides being reasonable, I think we're going to move ahead, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, yes.
We decide about number one.
Number one, I think for now, the decision is to leave it. Because, well, hold on, Bob. The only reason why is because of this. Because we have, until we change the ordinance, we have no way for it to transfer unless that site becomes a permanent global vending courtyard.
Well, I'm strongly in favor of dropping one, and the reason is that if somebody's coming in there to do something quite different, then it works. You still need a cup, and it's not. But if it runs with the land, then they can continue to do the same thing. But if they're going to do something very different, then it's reasonable. And I'm hoping that we can make health conditions a little more reasonable tonight. But the point is that I think it is better to just not require a cup no matter what. When something happens with the change of the plan.
Okay.
Make a procedural discussion. We just do this. We'll poll for each one of these and then kind of tidy it up so that we can make a motion to go forward this evening. So there's good folks up in the wall.
You are on the same page.
Knock it out.
Yes, okay, so everybody is aware, in case they didn't hear that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down each one of these 17 items, and we are going to do a voice vote within the commission as to whether or not we keep one of those items and or amend it as discussed. So for the first one, I'm gonna start on my left, and then we will work our way across, and I will request from Mr. Thompson, and then we will move back and forth as we go. So starting on item number one.
I think it should be straight.
Okay.
And I think it should be kept. And I think it should be kept because the cups that we have approved in the past have also had the same requirement. It does not come with the land. So to do it differently is kind of out of step with what we've done. But also, there's a very prominent location near the boardwalk, and I think it just provides us the ability to do checks and balances. And I think that's what's important.
Good.
Steve.
I know you were for strike. Mr. Thompson, how do you vote for number one?
I would go strike.
Great, thanks, guys. Right. My personal thought is until we amend the ordinance in order to provide some kind of something to get us a transferability, something to that effect, I'm gonna have to go and keep it. So that would be 4-3 for keeping number 1. Number 2. Mr. Thompson, how do you vote for number 2?
Keep.
Okay. Bill?
Keep.
Keep it.
No, and keep, so that's unanimous, okay. Number 3. Start with you again, Pat. Basically says it
Providing information.
pretty much, it says they're gonna maintain with the plan they provide. Okay,
Yes.
it's 2.
Keep.
Okay. 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 Mr. Thompson.
Keep.
Okay, and me as well.
Chairman,
Yes.
if I can, to disrupt the flow.
Mhm.
Make a suggestion that
Sure.
as we, maybe the chair can just go through and say condition 3 or condition 4, if anyone has wants to have any discussion on it, to take a small vote, then we could get into that, it might be a little faster.
Okay, so number 4, applying with all the applicable laws, is there anyone in favor of striking? No, Mr. Thompson.
Nope.
Number 5 is zoning permit. All the standard health department and licensure and all of those things. Is there anyone in favor of striking that or any portion of that? Mr. Thompson?
Nope.
Okay. Number 6 is the screening plan. Is there anyone in favor of striking or modifying the screening plan requirement?
Could you explain to me what a screening plan is?
This, I can explain that one to you. The screening plan is basically a landscaping plan that provides coverage that blocks the view of the area. So most likely it would be something, whether shrubs or trees of something of that nature back by the hotel to block the view of the back of the. Correct.
Would we need to specify that specifically so that the landscaping or screening is in the right location?
Because it's only got the southern border listed currently.
We will, I'm sorry.
No, we were just curious if we could assign that to where it does provide the privacy of the screening for the hotel.
So what staff was gonna propose is that how we're gonna approach this is we will the entire property. We will obviously put emphasis on the hotel. And any other adjacent properties where there's potential visual impacts to mitigate those with trees or other types of plants or fencing or landscaping. Rather, understand that the size of the trees are probably going to be something, at 2.5 or 2.5 inch caliber, at breast height, something to that effect. So there will be something that will screen over time, unless the commission wants to require something above and beyond what the typical landscape requirements are to try to get more instantaneous screening. It does take time for plants to mature and trees to mature. There's argument to be said that the younger the tree, the faster it does grow. And a larger tree planted instantaneously on the property over the long term. But that's up to the commission to decide if they want something larger trees in a particular location
And then we can adjust the condition accordingly.
I think leaving it a little vague is good. It gives the proprietors the opportunity to come up with some ideas, and it looks like you're kind of brainstorming it some right now, as a matter of fact. So I think the fact that we have it worded the way it is, that includes the southern boundary, street frontage, and other site landscaping. I think that covers the entire property scape. So any other, yes? We can do that. Mr. Thompson, did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any other changes you would like to see to number 6?
No changes.
Okay. All right. Number 7, we talked about that change already, striking the location references and just talking about safe pedestrian access and physically challenged persons access. Okay. Anyone have any other
Specific, Mr. Chairman, if I might. So the condition would read, the food trucks must be located with safe pedestrian access and shall be designed to accommodate physically challenged persons.
Okay, I'm good with that. Yes.
I know we as a town are trying to become more accessible.
Yes.
And perhaps using the words ADA accessible or ADA compliant.
Yes.
Might be the terminology
Okay.
put in here.
Okay. So
ADA compliant.
thank you. If you could add that.
ADA.
ADA compliant, yeah.
Repeat what she said.
So she was saying that the town is trying to make sure that they are becoming more ADA compliant throughout the town. So adding that statement, ADA accessible or ADA compliant within that statement was all she was suggesting, which I,
Instead of physically challenged persons.
right. So making the site more ADA or making the site ADA compliant. Yeah.
Shall be designed to be ADA compliant, will be the last part of it.
Perfect, thank you very much. All in favor of that here so far? Okay, Mr. Thompson, you all right with that?
Yep. That's good.
All right, move along. Try to get this done. Number 8.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
might, I think, we can use the terminology, designed to be ADA compliant.
Shall meet ADA compliance.
Well, in ADA compliance will likely require hard surfaced areas.
There are also mets. They can.
Right, but I mean, and I think that is a change from where we've been. We were talking about basically
Could we possibly ask the applicant if they're able to do that or willing to do that? Making it ADA compliant.
We can, but I will say that it's ultimately up to the building official in Westmoreland County to make that determination. Part of what we don't know, and it'll have to be engineered accordingly, because when you start putting in ADA compliant, for example, ramps, there's a minimum rise and fall that you have to be able to have a wheelchair get in there, and so that just so may require longer spans of concrete or other surfaces across the property that is not shown on the plan, but would ultimately have to be put in ADA compliant. Now, this is a ADA compliance is required for new development, so.
All right, so this is not new construction,
So.
right? So what's the work here that we can do so that we get what we're looking for, but we don't end up. Yes, you have a comment.
The existing structure
Yes,
is right there on the town sidewalk.
correct.
I think the larger concern
It's-
is the lack of ADA compliance with the
Just-
sidewalks.
Yes.
So if the site, if from the beach to the
Mhm.
sidewalk was made ADA compliant,
Mhm.
then the location would be able to service any those with need directly from that
Gotcha.
concession stand. So that is a solution for
Okay,
Right,
I got you. Yes, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is are we putting an undue burden?
I don't think we're putting the undue burden, I think it's already built in within the building code. Because part of the ADA compliance is also gonna be to access the food trucks that are there. Unless the building, and I'm not the building official.
Right.
On here, but there may be requirements, maybe there might be some exemptions you might be able to use, but typically what I'm familiar with. Is that if you provide accessibility for somebody who's ambulatory, you have to provide equal or equivalent accessibility to somebody who is disabled. So it's just more of an FYI, staff is not requiring anything more other than what you've identified. So you know that as this moves forward to the building department, there may be additional requirements and costs that are not discussed tonight, but inevitably are going to be required. The building official determines compliance is necessary for certain aspects of Title 24 ADA.
So for. And I don't want to belabor this process anymore than we absolutely have to, but for the purposes of food trucks and where food trucks are parked, et cetera, or mobile vending vehicles. Is the building inspector involved in that?
Yes.
So the other side of that is if the building inspector approved the mobile vending vehicles that were on Town Hill. You see where I'm going with
I
that?
see exactly where you're going.
There is zero change in landscape in order to accommodate.
I think that's, to be honest with you, I think that I don't know the answer to that. I understand your logic and it makes sense. But until we've got a permanent land use on here, the building department may look upon this a little bit, scrutinize a little bit heavier than they would something that's temporary. I don't know that. But that's.
I would consider those trucks temporary, hence the mobile. So, and again, I'm trying not to put undue, unfair burden upon this situation that did not exist on a very similar situation in a very, very similar type of area. So,
And what's.
is there a different way to word it?
To be, what I would suggest here is that the building official has been on the force what he means to enforce by law. And so it really doesn't matter
Whether we say it or not.
condition or not.
All right. Then I would. Then it should be in compliance with code or something like that.
I would suggest, Mr. Peter, did you say?
Then just strike number 7. Then just strike.
He's gonna do what he's gonna do.
Or you could say.
That's the purpose of strike number, to simplify it. Yeah, it's pretty obvious to me, if you want business. Say you're gonna make sure that people are.
Mr. Thompson, the consensus here is to just go ahead and strike number 7, is it's both a quagmire and redundant. How do you feel?
I feel that's the right answer.
Great, thank you very much. So that is a strike. All right, number 8, any comments, concerns? Seeing none. We have one.
Yeah, we need to allow for other options other than receiving a gravel. In a manner acceptable to the director, I guess.
Yeah. Rather than reseed or gravel, could we say something it could repair in such a fashion as is acceptable?
That's what it says, except.
Just
the director.
except, so I would strike the reseed gravel specificity. Yeah. Should just be repaired. Shall submit a plan and time frame to repair those areas in a manner acceptable to the director. Is that agreement for
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? How do you feel about that?
I agree.
All right, getting there, number 9. I would agree with that statement. It's mobile. If they don't work, they shouldn't be there. Everyone else? Mr. Thompson,
I agree.
okay, number 10. So this is the one that we talked about. I agree with the public address system. I think that's unnecessary. The
Strike just the whole second sentence. So we just don't want somebody standing up front, hollering at the people to be,
Right.
come on down here, next contestant on the Price is Right.
Right.
Even though it's very in character with what we have in the past. But
I
at the same
think,
time, allow for it.
right, and I would have to agree with that. I mean, I think that would be fairly difficult to enforce actually because of the noise ordinances that exist in town. I think the ability to enforce that second line is pretty much zero.
I agree.
So, so it looks like striking the statement of amplified music may be played in the mobile vending courtyard, provided such music is not audible beyond the property boundaries, just strike that.
The noise ordinance, the town solicitor's gonna apply.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. So everyone here is in agreement, Mr. Thompson,
I'm in agreement.
okay? Number 11, signage. I think signage should be in accordance with town ordinance. So I think
That's it.
signage shall be accomplished in or adhere to town ordinance. Because all of that is covered in town ordinance, every single piece of it. Right, so you could just strike it completely. All right, agreed? Mr. Thompson,
Agreed.
okay. It's progress here,
Well,
number 12. Unless that's covered somewhere else in the ordinances, which I don't think it is, I think I'm fine with that one. I mean, it's a common sense one, but how common is it? Any consternation?
to be honest, 12 and 13 can be combined. Because it talks.
Yeah, unhealthy,
Solid waste,
yeah.
solid waste.
Yeah,
Just that I would strike number 12 and keep number 13.
I think 12 is more sensitive, yeah, I would rather keep that because it is a mobile vending food truck for it. So there's gonna be a lot of trash. So it has to be done with,
yeah, but when 13 does say solid waste disposal. Right,
but still. I
shall we,
think
It'd be once a week.
no, I
Kind of agree with.
I think the okay, how about this? The first line of number 12. Added to number 13. And the rest of it. Removed. Right, so take mobile vending courtyard shall be kept free of trash daily. As part of 13 and strike the rest of 12. Because it's.
There's some intent here that we're missing.
I think I would, staff would recommend, or from my perspective, to keep 12 and 13 in place as they're written. The challenge is that if we say the mobile vending court shall be kept free of trash daily. What we're saying is that, I mean, if you really want to drill down, you can't have trash on the property at any time. So you're basically saying it's impossible to enforce that kind of thing. You're going to have trash on the property, maybe on there, the next, going into the next day, and then you have collections the next day.
So having that conditions that are unhealthy by solid waste and stuff.
So if you look at the condition 12, it talks about keeping it free of trash, and the test relative to that is to try to assist with odors and insects and rodents, okay? And so that would, you know, it may smell bad, but that may not reach the test in 13, which is when something becomes unhealthy. So that's why we're suggesting the 2 conditions. 13 is really to deal with, and to me, solid waste disposal could be removed from that, but it gives us another thing to say, wait a minute, not only are you creating these issues with odor, this and this, it's unhealthy. And that's the same thing when it comes to how the water's handled, how's the dirty water handled, those types of things. That's what's really trying to be addressed in 13, more so than the trash.
Well, then 13 and 14 pretty much say the same thing. So if that's the case, I would strike either 13 or 14. Right, so my choice would be striking 13 because they, except that one is more technical verbiage, they basically say the same thing.
If I might suggest they be combined. Because I'm not seeing them saying exactly the same thing, because we're specifically listing in 13, dealing with the water and how all that's handled.
So then the compromise would be we keep 12 because it talks about collecting trash and removal of trash specifically.
But keeping it in a covered container.
Or keeping it in a covered container. Which I would assume you mean something larger than a regular small trash can, like maybe a toter, something of that nature is what you're referring to. Include, right? And then combining 13 and 14.
Well, I was concerned about the water supply, the disposal of that. So that's really a critical issue, I think.
Right, we're not taking that, but it's still dealing with the public health, safety, etc. So I think if we can combine the 2 of them. Yeah, I'm not saying change it, just combine 13 and 14.
I'll just make it one.
Just make it one bullet. Right? Does that work?
Yeah.
How do you feel? You got it? Okay, Mr. Thompson, did you catch all that?
Right back to 12.
Yeah, I think they can be combined.
Okay, so we're keeping 12 as is, and then we're combining 13 and 14. All right. Once there. All right, 15, I think it's fine. It basically just says, if you don't do any of this, we can send the contract. Correct?
Yep.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Yep.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, so 16 we already talked about. Reference, except for like decorative lighting, putting some.
Okay, what I, and notwithstanding what you had, what I had written down, or at least part of the conversation I heard.
Yeah.
I was gonna suggest that I was gonna suggest that after we talked about what happens with future lighting or changes, I was gonna make a recommendation to add another line to number 16 at the end that says any future modified lighting shall be reviewed and approved by the community development director under the zoning permit or something to that effect.
I believe that's already in here. What I would add is I would say, except for decorative, temporary, decorative style lighting.
Okay, yes, that's
That
what,
it's very big in.
yeah,
All right.
that's what I was.
Comma, prior to erecting
Yeah.
lighting. Any lighting in addition to the 2 light poles in the property, the applicants shall submit details of the proposed lighting to the community development and zoning director for review and approval. All site lighting shall be downward.
Downward, just,
directed.
yeah,
Right,
directed,
but in the.
Yeah.
That wouldn't apply to the decorative, so we've got the except.
right, except, right,
Mhm.
okay. So, all good with that?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson, are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go with that. Last one. So it's basically just the hours. You guys propose the hours. They just threw the 11 on there for the later thing. If you don't want to stay open that late, it doesn't mean you have to.
Just do 9 to 11. if
Yeah.
you be done with it.
I agree. I would just set it 9 to 11. And then they're not gonna stay open until 11 on the other nights anyway. Go ahead. I see you want to say something.
If you guys are fine with 11, any night of the week, then, I think we have to make the assumption when looking at the condition.
Mhm.
That gives the permission to stay open to 11. So we can't make the assumption of, oh, they don't want to do that, it's okay if it's 11. But please really consider, if you say 11, Tuesday night it's 11,
Is that?
Sunday night it's 11.
Yeah, is that connected with the noise ordinance?
Well, it's really relative to operational hours, not movies.
I understand, but that's typically what's gonna be the largest impact to the adjacent properties, because lighting is lighting. It's like,
The business is up until 11 o'clock.
yeah.
Maybe ordinance is 11 o'clock.
That's all and
That's
you, yeah.
Yeah, outside of, so that's why I'm.
But it's 11
Yeah.
11 o'clock there.
So I was just making some.
Just making that.
And that's fine, I just wanted to mention that.
That one, understood, that, good point. Good with that?
No, we're gonna drop to that, Kevin, or-
No, we're just gonna change
9 AM to 11.
9 AM to 11 PM. So, yeah, it'll be the first one, and it'll just say 9 AM to 11 PM daily, and it'll stop there.
That's what he said.
So they requested 9 AM because they're opening hours. If one of these vendors decided, hey, there's a real need for breakfast food on the beach, starting at 7 AM. Do they have, what process do they have to go through to get that approved, and is there any harm in giving them now?
If the condition were to be amended, it would need to go back through this process because so unless we put something in here that would say. I mean, if you're not opposed to 7 AMs, whatever that number is, that's what I would include in here. Or, well, no later than 11 PM daily.
7 to 11, what do you say?
Sure. Let me piggyback on that. With the process, I think that might help. Is we can add some additional verbiage that basically says. If between this is just off the top of my head. If the operator wants to open prior to 9 AM, between 6 AM to 9 AM, that it requires the approval of the zoning.
Sure.
So again,
As a temporary, it's a temporary event, basically, not as a permanent thing.
So. If they see that there's a need for breakfast to be served in that general area, whether it's coming off the beach or it's coming out of condos, or it's people going into Kobe to do some work or whatever it is. And they see that that's a need in that area. I don't see a way we should have to come back in here and tell them that they can do that as a business owner. So I think if the way to do that is to give them the opportunity to have hours from 7 AM to 11 PM, then I think we just do that. Because as a business owner, they should have the ability to make that choice as to whether or not that's a viable option.
I like that flexibility. They can set their hours within.
Correct. Correct.
Yes.
And how does everyone else feel about that?
I think the point of this last one is that we don't want any disturbance to the neighborhood. It has nothing to do with whether there's business. It's just that you don't want them to be working before 7 AM because.
It was proposed by the applicant, this was not Scott.
That's what I'm saying, then why would we need it at all? Except to.
Is it typical to put it in there for others?
Or what's?
Hours of operations, yes.
Good, then I would just say 7 to 11 would be my vote.
So.
Are you,
Mr.
Mr. Thompson?
If there's any change to that in the future where they want to expand the hour, then they would have to come back.
Correct.
So this-
However, I think the likelihood of them wanting to be open at 5 till midnight is very small. So, but yes, agreed. If there's a change outside of that, then yes. Okay, now, I think we are to a point. And correct me if I'm wrong. Because I probably am.
I guess what I would say is that you had some discussion
There was.
about no generators. Or,
Well, so the discussion, what I said was, putting some kind of a provision in there about moving towards shore power versus generator power. Is there, can we give a time frame, kind of?
Is the point that these trucks automatically do not use electricity? And so that's why they need to have generator, I don't.
They're basically trailers. They're basically trailers. If they're gonna have any cooling products in there, any refrigeration. If they're gonna have a fryer that's not gas operated, anything that is in the vehicle that is not propane, whatever operated, needs some kind of power.
Right, so, I'm just saying they already have.
Generators.
Are we, I guess I'm confused because I thought it was only applying to power generators, gas power generators.
Right, do they operate on generators right now, or are they, they do not? So there's no generators associated with them at all, then it's a non-issue. Never mind, it's a non-issue.
and Mr. Chairman, if I might, they don't have units that have generators. What is your desire if another mobile vending unit comes in
Then it's a
and
change.
replaces one of these, and those units do have generators? So
You would have a condition to cover it.
you wouldn't have a condition to cover it in that case if that's a concern.
If,
I think the, wording about noise covers.
Not explicitly, no.
so maybe not explicitly, but. So tell me, them bringing in different food vending vehicle is, well, they don't want the property owners don't want generators used on it, and they're like the ultimate. Say, A, and B, if they change out vendor trailers and it's a different trailer, doesn't that negate some of this? Doesn't it bring it back for review?
No,
It
it's
does
just
not.
something for now.
No, it's
Yes,
just as long as they go to the same location and use to the site plan, then it doesn't require you other than the individual.
So you may be silent, right? You might be silent on it, and so if the next mobile vending unit comes in and has a generator, if the property owner doesn't say, well, we're not gonna lease to you because you have a
Can we
A
put
generator.
can we put a one-line statement in there that any Units must be ground powered or attached to, is there a way to word that?
Shall not operate off of a generator.
Yeah, sure. Should be like one line, right? Is that a whole thing? Okay. And that will make that number whatever it is after we deleted some and wherever it fits on the list.
Let's read in the condition.
Right, so what I have is. Mobile vending vehicles shall not operate. Off of a generator, I don't know if that's the right word, that didn't sound right. With generation, with power by.
With
Generated power.
generated. Let's call it generated power.
Thank you.
Just, I think that's clear enough for us anyway. Even if it's maybe not the most technical way to say it. Okay. All right, so. Do we have any other changes that we're looking at?
There was some discussion, just want to make sure that you, about the parking and about how the employees are allowed to park on the grass, and the way the conceptual plan is provided in the application. They're gonna keep that area of grass, and the only parking that they're gonna allow there is their employees who drive to work in a golf cart. That doesn't mean that an employee couldn't come there in a vehicle. If they do, they're gonna have to park somewhere other than the on site. Because they didn't want to make improvements on the property and create more impervious.
Right. So I think we,
Didn't mention anything because there's no public parking designation, right?
so I think we just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now. Hopefully. We are to the point. We can make a motion.
Yes.
One thing I would do just for your is let's go through, I'm gonna go through real quick and number the conditions.
Okay. One, two, three, four, 5, 6 changed, 7 was struck.
Yes. So I'll run through them. I'll run down them if you'd like.
Nice and nice and brief.
Make sure everybody's on the same page. I don't want any confusion with y'all start flooding it up. So there's a condition 1.
Yeah.
That remains. Condition 2 remains, no changes. Condition 3 remains, no changes. 4 the same. 5 remains the same. 6, there is a change in condition 6, and that is in the second sentence. It would read, such plan shall identify the additional landscaping and or solid fencings to be installed along the property boundaries.
Okay.
And then it continues street frontage and other site landscaping period.
Yep.
7 has been deleted.
Yes.
So what was condition?
Your statement there.
Well, we could do that if you want to, but anyway, I've got to
Go
renumber
ahead. Yep.
it. So 6 would have that one change, 7 has been deleted. 8 becomes 7, the change to that is in the last sentence, part, it says the property owners / applicants shall submit a plan and time frame to repair, thank you,
Those areas in manner are acceptable.
repair those areas in a manner
Okay. Yep.
acceptable to the director.
Yep.
The next condition was 9, it's now 8.
Mhm.
The next condition 10 is now 9. The last sentence of that condition is being deleted.
Yes.
11, which was previous 11, has been deleted. So what was condition 12 becomes condition 10. There's no changes. Condition 13 and 14 are combined, right? They will be numbered 11.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yep.
So what was condition 15 will be 12. No changes otherwise. What was 16 will become 13. And that will begin, it's to read, except for decorative lighting.
Yes.
Prior to erecting any lighting in addition to the existing 2 light poles on the property, the applicant's property owner shall submit details of proposed lighting to the community development and zoning director for review and approval. All lighting shall be downward designed so as not to spill over onto adjacent properties. And then what was condition 17 becomes condition 14. It now reads, the mobile vending courtyard shall be permitted to be open to the public between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. daily. And then there is a condition 15. And condition 15 reads, mobile vending vehicles shall not operate with generator power. I keep saying that backwards. Let me say generator power.
Okay. All right, so that all sounds good to me. We at the motion point.
We're at the motion point.
We're at the motion.
And to remind the commission, we haven't had, for whatever reason, the commission has not done resolutions in the past. And I want to reinstitute that. It's normal and customary.
Yes.
Everybody I know of, except here till now. What that resolution is, basically identifies who the applicant is, what the application is for, what the commission's findings are, to recommend approval to the council. And it incorporates through attachment A in this case, the conditions of approval so that it's thoroughly documented what the commission's intent was when they recommended approval of it, and we have a record of that moving forward.
Okay, so
so when you make a motion for this, you would say something to the effect. I move to approve conditional use permit 2301 as written in the resolution with the conditions of approval as amended.
I move that we approve the planning commission resolution number 2023-01.
That's right.
And as amended, as we amended it tonight.
With the amended conditions.
With the amended condition. And we have a second. Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. It's a good point. Do we have any further discussion on this? Mr. Thompson?
No further discussion.
Hey, wonderful. So let's start on the left.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, so that is a unanimous yes. So should I read this? Is that how it's supposed to work? Good. Thank you. Okay, all right, since that has passed unanimously, congratulations, thank you very much for your patience.
This will now go to the town council.
Correct.
It's on Wednesday, July 19th.
Okay.
For their consideration, the town council is the final authority for the site.
Wonderful, thank you.
It's been noticed, yes, it does. It's been.
Okay, we are gonna take a 10-minute bathroom break. I'm sorry this takes so long, but there's a lot of weeds we gotta get through on some of these things. So everybody who wants to come back and join us, we're on the next fun topic after this, which will be the short-term rental ordinance. So 10-minute break, we will Okay, so on to the next item. Item number 7 on the agenda. Is the zoning text amendment 3-004 short-term rental ordinance town initiative. The purpose is to codify proposed short-term rental ordinance under Article 18. If staff could read this in, that would be appreciated. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, back in April, the planning commission, at the planning commission meeting, staff informed the commission that the town council directed staff and the commission with input from a short-term rental committee to develop a draft short-term rental ordinance for their consideration. And the short-term rental committee was formed, and that committee met several times, April 27th, May 9th, and 25th, and June 15th. And the work of the short-term rental subcommittee has been provided to you this evening, along with the recommendations from staff relative to the draft ordinance that was discussed with the short-term rental committee. And there are similarities in staff's recommendation and the committee's recommendation. Some differences in the versions deal with the main differences are between the two versions are related to the committee's recommendation to not charge an annual fee for the permit and not requiring an operator's signature verifying proof of insurance. There were a few other things that they suggested not be included in the ordinance, such as maintaining an occupancy log, emergency numbers posted within the unit, and occupancy of the short-term rental based on persons per bedroom. What you'll see as far as the other changes in here that are proposed this evening for your public consideration is the fact that staff is recommending that the permit could be an annual permit that is required. And it's a zoning permit. It is not actually a short-term rental registration. Part of that was staff's looking at this issue and trying to, there are two ways in that are allowed under state code for a locality to deal with short-term rentals. And most localities handle it through their zoning ordinance and under the enabling legislation in state code that allows you to regulate a land use. And so staff's recommendation is that the language not be changed to say registration or business license and registration. That was recommended by the short-term rental committee, but rather keep the language that staff had recommended relative to it being a zoning permit. I'll be glad to, if you want to, we can do it now or we can do it after public input. But the draft of the ordinance outlines for you the differences between, if you see the language in here, something's underlined, it was added, obviously, if it's shown as with a strike through, it was stricken, but it also identifies you for you versions of some of the items in the ordinance, whether they are the staff recommendation or whether they're coming from the committee, and it shows you what those differences are.
I think we can do that after. Public comment as we
Yes,
go
sir.
through the process.
Thank you.
That way we're not doing it twice.
Thank you.
Chair, I just wanted also just to add to our record is that Councilman Williams passed along to an email to the planning commission a series of attachments. So I just wanted to remind you of that and to make that transparent.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay, without further ado, we're going to move on to the public comment portion of this. We have our sign up list, and seeing as how it's late, I will not be requesting any further volunteers from the crowd after we go through the list. So we will open this up for public comment at 8:27 p.m. Lori Gold.
I am Lori Gore, 134 4th Street, Colonial Beach. I was appointed a member of the short-term rental subcommittee. It was something that I took very seriously. We had a lot of meetings. We talked in depth with staff there about the recommendations. We had input from citizens there at 3 of the meetings. And I feel like that we came up with a good compromise, and I was a little taken back when I saw this come out with that staff recommended changings from what I thought we had all worked out in the short-term rental subcommittee. And again, it was something that I did not take lightly. I feel like the other members did not take lightly. And one member drove in from DC for at least 3 of those meetings to be here for her input into it. So thank you.
Thank you. Eric Nelson.
Eric Nelson, 1321 Lossing Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this. I also was appointed to the subcommittee on the short-term rental issue. And first of all, let me say that I am really pleased that the town is taking this issue up. I think it's long overdue. As an owner of short-term rentals, I've never really had a clear idea of how many are out there. And I pay all of the fees and all of the taxes that I'm supposed to be paying. And I want to make sure that, I'd like to make sure that all of the other people who own short-term rentals do the same. So it's really good for the town to have a process to know where all the short-term rentals are through the registration process that was developed to the subcommittee. So I support the effort. However, I think it's patently unfair to treat a business that's so important to the town like short-term rentals in a way that is much more burdensome than any other business in town that provides a service that has equal amount of liability. For example, one of the things in here that's related to it's 12C says the name and telephone number of the host or host designee shall be conspicuously posted within the short-term rental. The host or the host designee shall answer calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the duration of each short-term rental to address any problems associated with the short-term rental unit. This is ridiculous. I mean, some of these suggestions in here or requirements in here, if they were adopted, would be way overly burdensome on the short-term rental owner. The short-term rentals are an asset to this town. We provide a valuable service to this town. We are not some sort of plague that needs to be wiped out. And I feel very concerned, and I support what Lori Gore just said, that we all took our participation in the subcommittee very seriously. We attended all the meetings, we contributed in a very thoughtful way, and I thought we came up with something that was very reasonable, that satisfied the town's needs, and was something that was workable for the short-term rental owners. So I support the effort, but I don't support some of the staff recommendations that are included in here. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Fitzpatrick.
So I'm not Michael Fitzpatrick. I'm Kelly Woods Fawn. 2 Kettle Bottom Drive, Colonial Beach. I am speaking for Mr. Fitzpatrick, who needed to leave. He sent a note and said he does not agree with the suggestion on the annual registration fee. It should not be one time, it should be annually, same as the golf carts in town. To strike out the logbook requirement, again, it would be burdensome. And there also are some legality and privacy concerns there. And the last one was requiring a proof of insurance for all registered rentals, as you would, same as golf carts, which I would believe liability insurance or homeowners insurance. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Siciliani.
Okay. Tony Siciliani, 210 Azalea Road. I just want to correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't heard in any of the meetings online that there's a problem with the owners of the short-term rental, the buildings of the short-term rental, or the people that live there. It's not their problem. We are confronted with the town having to coordinate and structure some type of process or procedure to control the short-term rentals, such as every other place in the country have specific rules, such as registration, tax paying, location, how to fund the short-term rental administration with Colonial Beach. How do you handle it? You need funds for it. A lot of the registration fee. In addition, need an ordinance, which is actually a preventive maintenance document, which is written with very specific rules to prevent problems from arriving, not prevent problems that are happening now. They're to prevent what might happen in the future, such as the number of people in the building. Parking, which everyone in this room knows is a major issue in Colonial Beach. So this is a time to address it with the short-term rental. Trash and events and responsibilities of the owner, not to put too much of a burden on them. This town needs structure in it. Well, the ordinance must be 100% resident friendly, but not necessarily business friendly. Do as much as you can, because it's a privilege to have any business in a residential area. It's not very common, but it's getting more common with the short-term rental business. And I can tell you, I've talked to several people that own short-term rentals in this town that have no idea what to do. They're signed up with VRBO. And I said, I don't know if they pay taxes. I don't know if I'm only allowed to have 6 people in the house. He said, this weekend, my neighbor told me there were 20 people in the house and he had no idea. That's what needs to be in the rules. So they're very specific, so there isn't any question about, here's our guidelines. And if you don't like them, fine, you can always go in to the town and ask for a waiver. Just like on your cup thing. It's always, you're always available to go to the town and say, hey, I know I want to have this cup. I need a waiver from it.
Thank you. That was your time.
Well, I'm gonna stay here.
No, you're not. You are going to stop because if necessary, we'll turn your microphone off. You get 3 minutes, just like everybody else.
Talk 5.
No, they did not. Because I have a time.
Another thing.
And Mr. Siciliani, Mr. Siciliani, I am trying to speak to you in the most respectful manner that I possibly can, and I always have.
No, you haven't.
Okay, but I also believe that there's no reason why you should
Now
continue.
you're on my time.
No, you're not.
You're on my time.
No, I'm not, because you had your 3 minutes. Your
I don't-
time is up.
I don't.
Your time is
I
up.
don't appreciate.
Your
wasting
time
my
is
time.
up. Your time is up.
You wasted 30 people's time here tonight.
Your time is up.
Something you could have waited till the end.
That's not up to you. That is not up to you.
You're not-
Your time is up.
You're not a very good representative of the planning meeting. When you disregard everyone's time and you're yelling at me at the podium. Yelling at me at the podium.
We're back. 8:37. Next person on the list, Sandy Rockheaver. I'm sorry, I'm totally.
Rodeheaver.
Roadheaver?
It's Rodeheaver.
Rodeheaver. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine, it's a crazy name. Live at 704 River Ave.
Okay,
Here.
thank you.
And I guess the reason why I'm speaking tonight is, well, I've glanced over what you have as a draft, but. I guess my big concern is we've put up with so much for so long. And I mean, I have, the street I live on is a small street, and right now, there's two boat trailers, half in the road and half on the side of the road. And it's constantly, the trash, people leave on Sunday and all the trash is in the front yard and trash doesn't get picked up till Wednesday. It's everywhere. So it's been a headache from the very, very beginning, and people, they don't do anything to clean up their areas or anything. And I really believe that a lot of the STRs are way more people than should be there. The other day, there must have been 8 kids in 2-bedroom house that's right across the street from me. I love kids, don't get me wrong, but 8 kids, and it looked like 4 adults to me. They were in and out, running around like crazy the whole time. So I just want you to know from myself how I feel. I mean, I guess it's okay for this, we gotta get plans and be able to make it all work somehow. I'm not sure, I just don't see, I mean, I see a good step, you have a draft, but maybe I feel like it's not happening soon enough. And I'm not sure what to say on that, you know, can't call a policeman, and what are they gonna do? Anyway, it's really a lot messier than a lot of people maybe see.
Okay.
So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Susan Driscoll.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay, thank you. David Williams.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission, David Williams, 1535 Irving Avenue. As you've seen, I've shared a lot of information I've gathered from citizens. And as you all know, probably 2 years of campaigning, I knocked on all doors in most of the neighborhoods, you know, all registered voters. And spoke to a lot of people, and they raised a lot of concerns as I was going. And I think one of the biggest things that I heard was, look, there's 3 there, 2 there, 1 there. Some people were surrounded by Airbnbs. So full disclosure, I do not own any Airbnbs, never have, probably never will. But while I appreciate what the committee did, the subcommittee regarding short-term rentals, I think almost all, but maybe one person owns short-term rentals or managed them. And I don't know if that was even disclosed to the public, but me personally, I think everybody that's making this decision should disclose to the public how many they own and what their interest in it is, just for, you know, transparency's sake. Just a few comments, and I know I'll get another stab at this as a council member, but I just want to bring things up for the commission to consider as well. In addition to what I sent, contacted the town because I found out that short-term rentals are now required to report to the town the addresses. We can't get them personally as citizens, but they said there were 129 that reported to the town in May that used either Airbnb or VRBO. So that means that we probably, and that's only the ones that report using those 2 companies. So they're probably closer to 150 to 200, maybe even upwards to 250 or more. So please consider there are plenty in town. I think that the owners should be local personally. I don't think we should have corporate owners. But that's just my personal opinion. And a lot of people and a lot of towns are actually going to that, where you actually have to be a owner of property in the town in order to have a short-term rental. Something to consider. Housing stock, back in 2017, 554 houses were recreational. That includes Airbnbs. I don't know, you know, what the percentage is, but we're probably looking at, you know, probably another 100 added since then, just for short-term rentals. So we could have 600 or 700 homes in this town, you know, taken up by recreational use, part-timers or short-term rentals. I think there should be a distance apart. I don't think they should be right on top of each other. I know myself and other constituents, they have several right near them. I got 3 behind me that opened up in the last 5 years, just behind me, and there may be more that are hidden, I don't even know. So consider a distance apart, would you please? I think that would help alleviate some of the stresses that Mr. Roy was mentioning. I suggest limiting 10 per household, or 10 people per household, and the number of guests should be limited to 2 bedroom. Okay. Parking and lights. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Will Knuckles.
Will Knuckles, 204 Monroe Bay Avenue. My comments are largely about the process that's been involved up until this point, particularly as it relates to the recent process of the short-term rental committee. Now, while I'm not casting any aspersions to any individuals that have been involved in the process, I know a number of them and think highly of them, but the process in general is not just about my relationships with these. I think it's about building trust, and the State Conflicts of Interest Act even talks about building the highest trust in their public officers and employees. That's because not only do we have to get the process right, we have to come up with something that people believe in, because when they believe in it, they're actually going to follow it or stand your chance of following it. Otherwise, when people talk about like, oh, it was all cooked up to sort of angle this in one direction or another, we have a history of this in this town of people casting aspersions because they believe that it was being done for a particular purpose, not for the good of the town. So to dissuade that sort of opinion, everyone that's currently on the planning commission, and I believe this should extend to the folks that were appointed as part of this committee, would have filed Conflict of Interest Disclosure Act filings. I would suggest that those be made public, both for the committee that made this, because it was clear in staff's notes that the committee actually was involved in drafting suggested language, right? So this is not like the town hall equivalent. This is different than a town hall where sort of everybody had, this was a subset of people that did this. To disclose those, I would suggest that folks that actually do have conflicts of interest go beyond disclosing and actually recuse themselves from the deliberation and the decision process. I think that we have a lot of voices that could be a part of this that don't have that sort of aura hanging over them. And I think that'll build a lot of credibility in the process. So I do believe folks want something to happen, but if we can get that something to happen without the appearance that it's being tainted for a particular reason, I think we're all going to be better off from a policy point of view. Thanks.
Thank you. Good, that's everybody on the list. We're closing public comment at 8, I'm gonna call it 8:46 because it's only a couple of seconds away from it.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I just wanted to say from a staff standpoint, in response to comments from committee members. When we received this in the direction from council, staff was, working on an ordinance. Council asked for input from a subcommittee, and I appreciate, and I know Mr. Julie does, as well as the commission members and council, all of the work, the hard work of the members of the committee. What I wanted to say is I hope that there wasn't a misunderstanding in that committee work, that the committee was actually writing a draft ordinance on behalf of staff. So yes, we were taking the input from the committee and we're sharing that input with you, just as we are sharing with you staff's recommendation. And so we didn't want to, there to be any confusion, because it was great working with the committee and they had great input, and we're sharing that with you all in this document.
Thank you.
Can we also get some clarification? So this was directed by council to us, and there are statutory time limitations that we have to abide by with that. Is that correct?
The response that was requested from council was that this would be returned to them in June. I do believe there was subsequent discussion with council. Are you aware of that, Tom?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so
return in 60 days.
yes,
I do recall, council person Karen Sullivan saying that there is a way for us as a commission to request additional time should we need it. And I missed the April meeting, I apologize for that, but I thought that there was an opportunity to get an additional amount of time. And that would be something that we could carry forward to the town council.
I don't remember that specifically, but I think when we ask for something to come back to us, it's very reasonable if it's not totally ironed out, that we would extend the time. I mean, and I'm speaking for me, I can't speak for council, but that's been my observations in the past.
Well, so. Prior to us having this meeting this evening. It was my opinion that this was not ready to go to the planning commission. I felt that it had just come out of the subcommittee, it needed to go before the planning commission, and there needed to be discussion amongst the commissioners. Prior to the public hearing and being able to have the input provided not only by town members, but also by Mr. Williams, who has been providing input from town members and other data as well. And to this point, we now have here more suggested amendments based on some things, and I think some of them are based on an ability to have a more clarified list, i.e. the change from from registration to permits, because I believe according to state code, if we have a registration list, we are not permitted to include realtors and any of the ones that they manage. And that being the case, any realtor that managed or any rental company that managed Airbnbs, short-term rentals within the space of the town, we would have no way of having any kind of listing of that other than what we would be able to research online. So it sounds to me as though having that change would preclude that problem and put us in a situation to where, in order, if they had to have this other process, then we would end up knowing about it without having a registration list, which is prohibited by the state. Just on that one factor alone, I think, along with all the other things that we need to deal with in this, I think this is not ready to go to town council. I'm one person, I only get one vote, so.
I wanted to reiterate that as well, and I fully agree with you. And I think we've heard from speakers tonight that there was some miscommunication. And I'm not sure that all of the members on the subcommittee are even aware of the changes that are being proposed by staff. And so additional time would give people that are maybe out of town that are serving on that and served on that subcommittee time to catch up to the new recommendations that staff is making. And I think a little extra time. It's not like we have an applicant waiting for us. So.
And I'm not proposing sending it back to a subcommittee. I think,
Yeah.
I think where it was to a point where the commission could look at it and the commission could have input and review and do their own research and have comment. And then it would be in a place to move forward to the town council. So I'm not proposing.
No, I wasn't suggesting that, just for the opportunity to be as, transparent as possible. I think it would be important to give the committee who worked on this time to synthesize this new information that just came out yesterday.
So
Or so.
based on that,
Yeah.
based on that, I am open to input from any of the other commission members as to how we want to move forward. Do we want to sit here at coming up on 9 o'clock at night and try to hash this out? Or do I am more than willing to stand in front of the town council this coming Wednesday and request more time? I don't think we can get it to town council ready tonight.
I propose that we schedule a work session as a way to move this forward so that we can deliberate with the public input real time.
I'm open for that, if everyone else is open for that.
My main concern is that, I really haven't heard from staff as to why they're proposing the difference between the committee and to me, that was something that would be very valuable to me to know. Now, I don't think we should probably a work session would be good, maybe we're suggesting that this would be the whole commission and work session.
Yeah, I would think so, and I think.
Do we need advertising for a work session? So that would be a problem in terms of the 19th.
3 days.
Yeah, we need.
It's only 3 days, 3 working days ahead of a meeting.
The staff is not, it's just to give the commission's insight, staff are not opposed to having a special meeting next week to move this thing forward, perhaps Tuesday. So we can continue working on it and we can deliver any outcome to the council for their meeting on Wednesday. From staff's perspective, we were directed and agreed that 60 days after the council directed the ordinance to be an ordinance to be created and vetted out through a subcommittee through the commission. As we've gone past that timeline, it was beginning of January, correct, of June. So we're anxious to get this back in front of the council as soon as possible. If the council wants to provide additional time for the commission to do so, or give another date to meet, then I think that's certainly appropriate, but I think we should be working as hard as we can to get in front of the council and at least advise them where we're at with it and the commission's recommendation for finishing it.
I'm completely open for Tuesday.
If, so this is a public hearing is required for the planning commission. Under what conditions would another public hearing be required of the planning commission before they voted to move it forward?
This would serve as their public hearing on this ordinance. I would defer, Mr. Duggington. It depends on what the changes, what changes are made. If the changes become so significant, then you would have another public hearing. But if the changes are not, then you wouldn't be required. I think that would be something that we would look at depending upon what comes out of the work session changes.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with Tuesday. Yes. You're saying you're not gonna be available? Okay. You're good Tuesday, Bob, would you be available on Tuesday if it becomes? Tuesday, yes. I don't think Bailey's still on there. Bailey, you still on there? Let's see. So Tuesday, are we, is that attainable?
It is for staff, certainly.
Okay. Then, yeah, is the room available Tuesday?
Should be. I don't have anything on the calendar.
Okay, well then that to me.
We
that
might
means
have
it's
to
probably-
start later though, because we do have DMV here all day,
Mhm.
so. if
What-
we
what
could
time
start
are you
at
thinking?
6.
Yeah, 6 is doable. I mean, it's only half an hour later. so.
Yeah, just to give.
And this is the only thing we're gonna be doing for the most part. So. Yeah,
Yes, sir, and I just want to clarify again that from the copy of the ordinance that you have in your packet.
Mhm.
This is shows from the staff's standpoint. the same ordinance that staff provided both to the committee, to council, and to the commission when we began this discussion. The changes that you see in this document based on staff are the changes, any changes that staff has made to this since then. So staff always recommended it be a permit, not a registration. So there's,
Can we get side by side clean copies?
yeah,
Like
yes,
one staff, one committee?
yes, we can absolutely do that.
We thought doing it this.
We were
way
trying to
made it
combine it
easier.
to make it,
I like the clip notes at the front, but then like once I start looking at cross ends and then the order of the who said what, that I kind of got lost in that. So just thank you. I appreciate it, but yeah, I think it would just be easier to clean and then I can mark and highlight and circle in there.
If you could reach out to Mr. Thompson on that, because it looks like he's not on any longer. I don't know if he dropped, it might have dropped him somehow, I don't know. But if you could, get with him on that, and then, you're not gonna be available. So, but otherwise, if everybody else is available, which everybody else sitting here has, right, we'll have a forum even if, Mr. Thompson isn't available for that, so. Yes, absolutely.
Sure, one comment is for the town attorney. If we've technically closed the public hearing for this.
Yes.
If we were can the chair reopen the public hearing and continue it to the special meeting to allow for public comment? And we can keep that alive, so as we move forward in this process, we don't have to renotice if we continue the public hearing to a date certain.
My concern with that is it's already been closed. Right.
But administratively, that's why I suggested the work session specifically because they tend to be more informal format. So we can not necessarily have a formality, you still have to have some sort of structure. Sure. But not necessarily with the legality of the reopening the hearing. We can still accept public comment now.
No, we could, I was trying to avoid a new noticing, which we have to put in the paper for 2 weeks, basically. And which we've already done for this meeting.
Yeah.
So that we're not being redundant, just trying to be efficient with our time.
Yeah, I think the work session probably covers that. Like, sounds like they are slightly more casual, and we do typically have public comment with those.
Had a public hearing for this, and now you haven't taken any action, still with council not council, the commission to look into this. The commission wants to have a work session. And I agree, if there's a major change that comes out of that work session, then you're back where you have to re-advertise and have a new public hearing, but you're still talking about the same stuff as we're talking about tonight, that shouldn't apply.
Okay. So Tuesday, 18 July, 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Okay. All right, so that being the case, we will.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, and I would defer to the town attorney. So if the commission takes an action tonight on this item, it would be a deferral to their work session. Would they have to defer this? That they couldn't take the action at the work session, correct? They have to take the action at their actual next meeting? Or would it be appropriate? I guess that's my question, to take action if they defer this to a work session.
I would have to check into that, but my initial reaction is they could take the action at the work session. They chose to do so.
It's appropriate. Since it would be appropriately advertised.
Right.
Okay.
So do we need a motion and vote on deferring?
So they could take.
We did.
So just so to be clear, so. Having the public hearing closed, they could, we wouldn't have to renotice it as long as that, and if they took action next Tuesday, as long as they're still discussing the issues here, we're not bringing in new information, making major changes to it, then they could actually take action on it.
Right, you're still talking about the same thing that's
Right.
been advertised,
But if they
trying to come to a consensus.
But if there's any change.
Just as an example, and I'd like to have you weigh in on this, if you were to, at your work session, decide to add some limitations, like on parking or number of guests, that would be a significant, substantial change and it would require another public hearing. But if you're just hashing out the details on this and the wording between staff and between what we advertise, it's not a substantial change. Right?
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for the clarification, everybody. I appreciate that. So do we have a motion to defer this until the work session on Tuesday?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm just gonna do a voice vote, not a roll call vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? None heard. Okay, so this issue is deferred until Tuesday, 18 July, 6 p.m.
As we move into the next item, Commissioner Thompson is apparently not returned.
Okay.
To the meeting.
All right, thank you.
The meeting as far as we know.
Okay. The next item is old business, of which there is none. The next item is new business, which is draft zoning text amendment 23-05, Article 16, conditional use permits, town initiative. And it's to update the text within Article 16, conditional use permits of the Colonial Beach zoning ordinance. And it's for discussion and for action. It says action on here, but I don't think we would be at an action point this evening.
That's correct. I put action on the agenda and that the commission has something they're directing staff to do.
So this is a town initiative. Does that mean it's a town directive? Is this another 60-day limit?
No, sir.
Okay.
This is the zoning text amendment 2305 from the planning commission work plan that was adopted earlier this year. The update its principal purpose was to strengthen that was identified in the work plan, was to strengthen the submittal requirements for determining project completeness, as well as strengthening or augmenting the findings for the CUP to be able to address things like such as parking, lighting, and other land use impacts associated with the operation of conditional use. However, staff has in this ordinance also suggested some additional modifications to the CUP ordinance to enhance its effectiveness from staff's perspective. The principal sections.
Before you get too deep into that, the biggest reason why I asked if there was some kind of a time limit on it is because it's 5 after 9. And I was thinking we would defer this to the next meeting.
If that's the commission's choice, we can do that.
Read this in and give us some homework and then go on.
Okay, I can do it.
Okay. So
Please continue.
The principal sections that I'd like to draw your attention to really concern amending the statement of intent, amending article or amending section 16-2, which is determination of completeness. Adding proposed section 16-6 for recreation of conditional use permit, and then amending section 16-8 for review by the planning commission. And I'll go through this fairly quickly. Going back to the statement of intent, the fundamental change that we're making in this is to identify that for those that read the conditional use permit ordinance, is that the conditional use permit is not a right, it's a fundamentally it's a privilege or a grant given by the town. To provide additional clarification to anybody interested in getting a conditional use permit, and that if you obtain a conditional use permit, you're still obligated to follow the other ordinances and municipal code requirements, as well as any conditions that are put on the CUP. So it's added clarification. In terms of determination of completeness, we really did not have any specific items that were needed to be submitted specifically for conditional use permit. The original, the way it's currently listed is that it talks about staff reviewing it for completeness within 10 days and then determining its completeness. So we're trying to fill that hole by introducing a few requirements, such as that the site plan be created or drafted consistent with the major site plan under Article 14, requiring everything from photographs of the site or a building. If there is no change to a building that's going to operate, or a conditional use permit is going to operate out of. If there's changes or a new building proposed as part of the conditional use permit, that we would have building elevations to see how the building was designed and how it's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and the town's design guidelines. We also wanted to have scaled floor plans to identify how the building's being used for conditional use, an operational narrative describing what the conditional use permit is, how it's going to operate. We also wanted to identify the existing adjacent uses of the buildings or how properties used immediately surrounding the proposed conditional use for context with the proposed use. And then finally to provide the Director of Community Development with the flexibility to require additional information if necessary to be able to evaluate the conditional use permit and to provide information to the commission. As I previously mentioned, staff is also proposing to change the determination for completeness from 10 days to 30 days, and to draft a incompleteness letter from 5 to 10 days. And the fundamental reason for this is that you have to understand with a small staff, there is a lot going on in my department at any given day. 10 days, we pretty much have to drop what we're doing and then go out and try to list comments that may not be available come back to us within that time frame. So this provides us with a little bit of breathing room. It also allows us to communicate with other departments or outside agencies as appropriate to get information and feedback from them. And 30 days, quite honestly, is in my experience, not uncommon in other communities that I've worked in. So this provides some context. With regard to the determination, or excuse me, recordation for a conditional use permit, you should have a revision, and I'm reading from that. We made a few little tweaks on it, and I'll explain what that is. But fundamentally, we're proposing to add this section to the ordinance that requires a certified copy of the resolutions authorizing a conditional use permit to be recorded with the county clerk, and that it's noted that no conditional use permit shall become effective and run with the land until it's legally recorded and made any kind of invalidated under section 16, 11, 12, and 13 of the ordinance. So we want to be able to provide something on title, on record to any future property owner that may have a conditional use permit that does run with the land, to make them aware of the conditional use permit and the operational conditions of that use permit. And then sections, excuse me, reviewed by the planning commission. This was to change that review time from the time it's being complete to the time that it's the recommendation from the governing body is given for 90 to 100 days. I believe that is aligns with state law. There's some other small miscellaneous changes in there, such as changing the name of director of planning to director of community development. So there's other little minor things, but that's fundamentally what I've discussed is the sort of big picture items that we're looking at modifying or making a recommendation to modify the commission.
You mentioned specifically the ability to request additional conditions for the applicant. Is there any provision that you've added or existing that would allow at the director's discretion to reduce some of that burden if it was not applicable to a specific circumstance?
If that does exist within the site plan requirements, I think that we can certainly talk about adding that, but I think that staff fundamentally covered it. The only thing that's really is going to determine how what's submitted is that somebody has an existing building that they're operating, that people would want to operate a conditional use permit out of. We just want photographs of the site, so and of the buildings. If somebody is, then that's all we would ask. We wouldn't ask for drawings or elevations, so that wouldn't make sense. But if somebody is making changes to the building, typically you would want that because it would have something to do with how the building operates as a conditional use. Floor plans are pretty standard. If you'd want to see the operation side of the building, and of course, the narrative of how the building or how the conditional use is supposed to be operated is pretty paramount to understanding potential land use impacts that a conditional use may require. So those particular items, I really don't see the needing to waive. We could certainly do that if that makes the commission feel more comfortable, but I think fundamentally most conditional use permits that I've processed over the years, that those are pretty standard things that are going to be required.
Absolutely. It's trying to find that balance between impacts adjacent and undue regulatory burden on the applicants. That's we're just trying to kind of find that silver.
Yeah, and staff recognizes that there has to be a really compelling need to have information that's submitted to them so that there's a nexus between what we're asking. We're not going to be asking for, crazy things, what's, 3 miles down the road.
It's not really anything about current staff. It's just about the fact that we have such draconian legacy code that has been pasted together over time, and we have no idea why people put provisions in there. So that's largely what this overhaul exercise has been going on for years now. So just kind of that's the framing that we're looking at is trying to eliminate any of those legacy things where they tend to get overlooked. Well, we'll just leave it in there because it's been in there, and then not necessarily it's like data for data's sake.
I like the idea of streamlining it. That's what we talked about earlier. And in terms of, what this would allow us to obtain with the elevations and the operational narrative. But aren't those things that we could request anyway without having to change?
Right now, there's nothing in the ordinance that asks for any of that information. So what happens is that staff is sort of at the mercy of the applicant to submit information that we feel would be appropriate to the review.
I understood that the commission could also ask for things that we might require, as well as the town council.
They absolutely could, but you would have to get to the public hearing part of it, or have a special meeting or something on the agenda to discuss that. That certainly is an option at any time.
But operationally, the goal is to have a prescriptive application that they can check the box. As long as you've got all of these things, they submit it. It reduces your burden because everybody's on the same page, and like you're not doing this ad hoc back and forth.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Let's provide consistency. That's all.
Okay.
I may have to ask, where in here does it say that, it can be different for. There are so many different ways that a cup is needed. Some of them are pretty simple and low budget, and others are big projects. it seems to me that we need to have, in other words, when I look at this and it says, application will be accompanied by 12 copies of plans 11 by 17 inches. Where does it say there, you don't necessarily have to do this you know, I mean, I just know people that are in a situation where they had to apply for a cop. And it's just a terrible burden.
Well, let me explain with the number 12, we provided that for figuring 7 commission members, everybody gets a hard copy of the plans. We have 1 for the file. We have 3 for staff, and then we have 1 for public use. And so that's how we came up with that number.
Oh, and number 12.
Yes, it's number 12.
Okay, well,
And it also provides, you know, the 3 copies for staff, you know, they send out.
say something like if they change it to the building, I mean, if they change the doorknob, obviously that's not change. Where is it, where are you on the line?
It's really, it's Commissioner House started to allude, it's really structural. If they're making changes to the building.
I would say it's probably along the lines of if you need a building permit in order to do what you're trying to do.
Yes.
But if you don't need a building permit to do what you're trying to do, then you could probably get away with pictures.
That's correct. As long as you, if something is changed on the building that somehow is part of the use, if somebody has like I'm just making this up, you know, you have 4 walk-up windows, you know, for something, probably want to know where those are located at and understand its relationship to the property and to how the building's being used. That's where you want to see some building elevations. If somebody's wants to operate a conditional use permit out of a building and there's no exterior changes, then photographs are perfectly fine. It just provides context.
Let me give you a real simple example. If a lot of the old buildings around here have not enough electrical outlets from modern occupation. So if somebody says, I want to add 8 outlets in my building, they would have to have a building permit because it requires electrical. So they have to go on, make all these drawings and everything like that?
No,
I wouldn't think so. I'm just worried that, you know,
all
complicating things, asking for recordings, this not making it easier.
It's with regards to the electrical outlets, I think part of it's common sense on what really is appropriate on here. I think our staff knows that. I'm certainly aware of what's appropriate and not in my experience. It's really if there's fundamentally no changes to the building, you know, including electrical outlets, I don't really, as a partner, don't care. Unless somehow that somebody is proposing a use that is going to generate, you know, the Griswold house, you know, you have all this electricity and glare and brightness surrounding the property, then I might be concerned about it. But you know, fundamentally is how the number of outlets or how they're working in the building internally. I don't really care about as much as I do about how the use is being operated.
I've already complimented staff tonight on their common sense. So I don't, if that doesn't bother me, what's in the writing kind of bothers me more, so but we'll bring that up later.
So we can work that out if we can all come up with verbiage, something that we think is probably helpful in that, and we can review that later. Yes.
If I may. This new paragraph that says no inherent right exists.
Yes, ma'am.
So I recall, and this is just for your if you would clarify for us, and maybe Mr. Duggan can weigh in on this. I recall John Shaw telling us that if the zoning allows by right uses and then this list of uses with a conditional use permit, as long as they follow those conditions that are set out, that we couldn't really deny. So is this in contradicting that or what?
Well, it's The irony is that Mr. Shaw drafted large part of this, and including that specific paragraph. If you have a conditional use permit has specific requirements that you have to follow, it might be codified in part. The other part is open to additional conditions as to be appropriate.
But we can't deny it if they meet our conditions, right?
You can, if you can deny a conditional use permit, yes, even well, go ahead.
Okay.
No. The conditional use permit is in, and the town attorney can jump in. Conditional use permit is an entitlement, it's a discretionary action that you can place conditions on it. You can, you don't have to put conditions on it. But fundamentally, if there is no, to my knowledge, there's no vested right to have a conditional use permit.
So then why does our ordinance, why does our zoning ordinance say these uses are by right and these uses are allowed with the CUP?
Because you have by right, certain things with, you want this up important, that's to say, you can do this can be administrative approval, if you meet all these conditions in this particular zoning for this district or whatever. That's by right. But this would be listed that one, this is requiring the CUP. So you have to, if you want to do a particular, at least that's why you should walk it down. If you want to do a particular thing that's not by right, then you go to really down and find and they can offer us setting out certain conditions for it. So they might be required to offer that. Right. Even if it is
As a conditional use, that's what I don't understand.
So,
It seems to be a contradiction.
So I guess. I don't understand what you're saying. Yes, so saying that a use for a marina in the residential district is a C. And so what you're saying is that we can, as long as the applicant goes through the CUP process and meets all of the guidelines and the conditions that are placed upon that administratively, we are, which you're asserting that we are unable to deny that after the applicant has met or agreed to meet all of those conditions.
No, because the whole idea behind it is that it's an individual situation that the body needs to look at to create these conditions.
Yes.
That satisfies the body that even though there's no by right there, that we can impose these conditions.
Right.
And it will be appropriate. So
what you're saying is that we can create whatever conditions that are deemed appropriate by the governing bodies, as long as, and if they are at some point overly prohibitive to the applicant, they can decline to meet those conditions. But we don't inherently, just because of the ability to place those conditions is what the leverage of action is in that scenario that allows for that applicant to be moved forward. So we have the ability to make those conditions. If they meet those conditions, yes, we have to approve that. Is that correct? Is that what
well, how about you decide what the conditions are?
That's what I don't say.
You approve it based on those conditions.
based on
whatever you set out.
and so your assertion is that intrinsically, you have to approve the CUP if they meet all the conditions. Yes.
If they've already approved it, if they want to make that particular use of the property, then they have to meet those conditions.
Okay.
Based on your approval.
All right.
Just to piggyback on that, understand that the conditional uses are fundamentally they're types of activities or land use activities that may have intrinsic qualities that are good that we want in the community, but may have primary, secondary impacts that are unique to that specific use. And so the conditional use permit is intended to provide some regulation to ensure compatibility, whereas the list of uses that are considered permitted are, as a rule of thumb, considered not to have these negative secondary effects. And so that's why we have conditional uses and permitted uses. Just with some additional background.
Okay. All right, so all that being said, we have our homework to do for doing a little research on this one and wording and. We do have the meeting Tuesday, 6 p.m. Where we will deal with the short-term rental. Do I have a movement? A motion to adjourn? So. And then adjourned at 9:28 p.m.